Hello, hello. How are you doing, Ashley?
Girl, it has been a week to say the least. But we here, we making it.
We are here. Welcome, everyone listening. It is recapping with Delora.
And Ashley.
So this week, we're just going to go ahead into our hot topics. Our first hot topic, it's our reactions to the current election that's going on. We felt like what a time to be alive, and we should just start off with this topic. So, how are you dealing with the current election?
Man, I feel like it's the moving target. It's varies from day to day, hour to hour, as we obviously, for the sake of those listening, are recording now on Thursday. Election day was Tuesday. We still do not have final results as of the time that we're recording this. And
We do not.
my anxiety, Delora, has just been so up and down. I think, Tuesday night, I kind of just tried to find distractions. I was dipping in and out, but I didn't sleep well. Wednesday, we're continuing on. I'm like, okay, I will say this, my 3 saving graces right now, as far as just really trying to, keep my mental and physical health together, has been friends and family. So thank you as one of those.
Yes.
Television, because distraction has been everything.
Absolutely.
And physical activity. I ended up walking 4 miles yesterday, Delora,
Yes.
because moving, getting out, nature has just been so helpful for me just to keep myself sane. Because, as we know, it's such an important election. I think the gravity and weight of that hits me more at certain times than others. But no matter what the results are, obviously life has to keep on going. We have to keep on going. I saw a post yesterday that really summed it up. No matter who is president, Jesus is king. And that's just what I've tried to hold close to my heart.
Amen, sister.
Over these 48 hours. So that's what I have at the moment. How are you doing? How are you feeling?
So I have been surprisingly and eerily at peace this whole time.
Amen to that.
Leading up to the election, specifically on like Sunday and Monday and during Tuesday, at peace. And I have I've been spending my time organizing and home editing things ever since. So like on Sunday, David and I completely overhauled our bookshelves for it to be functional. Like I was looking at my bookshelf one day and I was like, you know what? I have books all over the place. I don't know, the business books aren't with the business books. My fiction aren't with fiction. So we created that system with our bookshelves. On election day in particular, I reorganized my cabinets, like the most random things, right? I will say my saving grace have been like, reorganizing, cleaning, vacuuming, dusting, watching television.
Your house is going to be spotless. We'll say that.
You can eat off these floors, I promise. And then TV. I started watching Girlfriends. I shouldn't even say rewatch, because when it came out, I didn't watch it because, I was really young at the time and my mom didn't watch it. So, I knew the importance of the show, but I didn't know any real plot points, so to speak. But let's just say I started season 7 on Saturday, and as of yesterday, I'm officially done with the series.
Oh, nice. So we can get to a recap here soon then.
Absolutely. And then lastly, junk food. I'm not proud of it. And my face is the best indicator of it, because I have broken out on my chin, and I know that is direct correlation to Ben & Jerry's strawberry cheesecake ice cream. And today I gave myself a clay facial, and so that's why my skin looks amazing right now. But the situation down there,
you better toot your own horn, girl. Okay.
I mean, do you not see the glow? It's not greasy. It's
through Zoom, I see the glow, but I see it every week due to that melanin popping. So,
oh, God bless you. So, we're throughout this year as a whole, finding healthier ways to cope has been like, the subject of the year as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so, but I'm glad that we're both still very much healthy, still very much in our right mind, like the church used to say. And I'm just ready. I'm ready to finalize some things, and this being one of them. This is actually was one of my biggest anxieties of 2020 outside of the pandemic. So here we are. Yeah.
I think most people would agree with that, girl. So yeah, let's hope we get a resolution here soon, and that, we're able to move on in a positive direction. That's what I'll leave it with from my side.
Yes. And Black Twitter, as always, is the GOAT. It has been undefeated as far as I'm concerned. We're waiting for, I believe, 5 states at this point. And Nevada has been getting the bulk of the memes.
Yes.
The funniest one for me, and it had me hollering, was Nevada, and then it was a picture of Lauryn Hill. I was done.
Always late.
Done.
Always late. Yeah, I've gotten a bunch from one of my friends today, but Florida has also gotten some hilarious Instagram videos that I will say y'all should find and go check out, because that has been also humor. We got to laugh through it, baby. It's been a wild ride.
Or we will be crying all the time.
And I just said earlier on the call, I said, listen, I'm doing a little bit of both. I think doing a little bit of both here. So yeah.
So we're going to go ahead and get into our second hot topic this week. So we've been watching Dancing with the Stars, and one of the stars, Jeannie Mai, had to leave the competition this week. She had emergency surgery on her throat. It was a life-threatening condition, and if she hadn't gotten it worked on, the doctor says she would have died the next day.
Right.
She only
throat would have closed.
She only had a day before her throat completely closed up. And this is really sad, and I'm so sad to see her go. What were your thoughts when you saw this news?
I mean, it was definitely unfortunate, especially because we have both followed Jeannie's journey on the show, and she's had such a great run. I think she's probably been one of my favorites in terms of some of her performances.
Yeah.
And, obviously we talked about her. Yeah, her and Brandon, her pro, did a fantastic job. And, we talked about her previously about, the situation with her marriage and all of that. But a lot of the things that she discussed on the show, I didn't know about her, right? Like, I didn't know her background of her family and how they immigrated to the States. And even the fact, just the cute relation with her mom, where her mom was taking bets, about her staying on the show, just her whole journey I had enjoyed hearing about. And again, she was just so into it. She was such an exciting performer in terms of her energy every week. So I'm definitely sad to hear that her run got cut short, and obviously just her health in general, right? Yes. It's been such a crazy year for health. I was concerned when I found out, it was really about her tonsils and the fact that they had gotten so infected that it was impacting, other parts of her body that had made it life threatening. I've had my tonsils out. I had to get my tonsils out back when I was, I think 19 or 20. So I just wondered, as a part of that, given that I went through that, what warning signs were there or something like that weren't caught? Because, I just wondered from a health perspective if there was anything else that, fans or viewers should know, just in case anyone else could possibly deal with something like that. But obviously wishing Jeannie a very speedy recovery and hope that all goes well. She seems like she's a trooper, showing the footage from her hotel, from her room at the hospital.
Absolutely. And in her Instagram post, she mentioned what simply started as a sore throat became a dangerous infection that already closed at least 60% of her airway. Wow. And resulted in a throat abscess that spread in a matter of 3 days. So whatever, I mean, it's not whatever at this point, but the sore throat that she thought, it escalated
rapidly,
super fast. I'm so glad that she's okay, because that's scary. That is,
I mean,
really
extremely
scary.
right. It's one of those things that remind you, like, if something feels off, go to the doctor, go see your healthcare provider, because it could be, the gravity of it could be more than most people would imagine it would be.
Even if it turns out that nothing is wrong, it's worth the visit.
Right.
It is so worth the visit, because what if it, you get caught up in what ifs, it's better to do than wonder why.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'm going to go into a new segment. We're going to call it Microdose. Yes. And this is where we're going to talk about a show that occurs weekly, and we want to have something to say about it. Typically a network show, and this week Microdose is This Is Us. So the big three is back. What were your thoughts on this season premiere?
Oh my goodness, so many thoughts. So one of the biggest, probably that is overshadowing it a little bit for me, is Justin Hartley, right? Because given that, and I'm starting with the more frivolous before I get into the more serious ones that they got into, but given that we both watched Selling Sunset, which is a reality real estate show on Netflix, and his wife, Chriselle Staus, who, throwing back to Dancing with the Stars as a contestant, we got to see some unfortunate incidents that seemed to occur based on her perspective surrounding their divorce. And his character, because he plays Kevin, has already always been the more selfish, self-centered, narcissistic character. So now it just kind of overshadows it a little bit for me when I'm watching him. I'm like, but that's who you are in real life. It's really
disappointing, because you're like, oh, you are him and he is you.
Yes, it's like, this is a little hard for me to still feel, because before you could think, this is a character, and so you give him graces that you don't necessarily always give somebody in reality if you see them treating someone, in this case, in my opinion, badly. His situation with Chriselle was seemingly he announced their divorce to her over text, and some subsequent things just seemed so insensitive, and so
he not only announced it over text, but he did it before, like, literally 10 minutes before the media found out. So he didn't even give her the grace to process, to find a place to stay or anything.
I remember when they talked about their paperwork being filed, his date for separation was like July or something like that, and she's like, listen, we've still been together, it's like November or something along those lines of a timeline. So again, the whole thing just seemed hyper insensitive. And I remember it reminded me of when Jen Aniston, I think, said that Brad Pitt had a sensitivity chip missing with the whole Angelina Jolie scandal. I'm like, that's just what that reminds me of, right? It's just, I don't know how you could be so cold to someone who you married and were supposedly in love with. But anyway, so that's been a part of me.
Really quick, is it awful that I don't feel the same way about Brad Pitt the way I feel about Kevin?
No, I don't. I mean, that's a whole nother tangent we can go on at some point, but I agree with you. I definitely think the brunt of my feelings for that, unfortunately, fell at Angelina's feet. And it's not to say that I don't think that the repercussions of what happened, I did not savor some of that with the Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie messiness of their divorce. I feel like karma is a biatch. But back to This Is Us. Back to This Is Us. Obviously, we're also in the show dealing with the realities we're facing currently, right? They talk about, George Floyd's murder. They talk about, the pandemic and kind of how our favorite characters are dealing with that within this show. And I don't always know how to feel about that with art, because I feel like a lot of the shows who have come back have really tried to address these things in their universe. And to a certain degree, I go into television trying to escape from reality, but I also understand why it's important and why they don't want to shy away from it. So, it didn't turn me off to this episode of This Is Us. It was just another factor in, like, the heaviness and drama that already exists for this show.
So can I say something really quick?
Absolutely.
My first impression of the show or the season coming back, it was a little bit too close. It's a little bit too real for my liking. It felt way too real. It felt like I was watching a reality situation, but with the Pearsons, because
especially with Randall, because Randall is my favorite character.
Especially, he makes the show. I'm sorry to anyone who may be offended by
Brown,
that. He deserves all the accolades he has gotten. Him and of course the father. But it was very raw, because I still feel like I have those emotions. Like I was reliving all these things with them, and Absolutely. I didn't know how I felt about that, because This Is Us is so beautifully written. Mm-hmm. I mean, this episode was dynamic, don't get me wrong, but just phasing in COVID and the racial reckoning that's going on in this country. Because it's happening in real time, I'm just curious on how they're able to fold that in, and the lasting impacts of their flash forwards and things like that. So I, again, love the episode, but it was extremely long, and that part in particular was a bit heavy for me. So
yeah, they did start out with this was a 2-hour season premiere for them. And I agree with you. It was definitely tough. Again, I think because it's our favorite characters that are really bearing the weight of it in this episode in particular, which is Randall's family. And then that moment with Chrissy Metz character outside.
And I was screaming at the TV like, yes!
I mean, it was just so powerful. I remember talking to my mom afterwards, and when he was saying, look, listen, I just want to go home and be with my wife and kids. He's like, listen, I can't deal with y'all white people today. Like, and I'm not saying that to be funny. I'm saying for sure, as this black man who was grown up in this white family, I think in that moment, he's like, listen, I just have to go be around the people who understand from a real level. You can sympathize with me, but you can't empathize with me. I need to go be with my family that can empathize with me.
And the fact that he lived with this family, and Kevin has always been, in my opinion, detached. He said so much so in the fireworks fight that happened at the end of last season. Yeah. But I mean, with Kate, and I'm so glad they went. Who are these writers? Because they are doing the damn thing, okay?
I know.
Because the fact that they even referenced, because we know this isn't new, so they referenced the incident that happened in the 80s, and he was like, this has happened. This is not new for me. And the fact that he talked about being a young man and processing it by himself and having no one in his household to lean on, that is so tough. But Randall, favorite character, but his therapist, she is queen as far as I'm concerned, because she has told him about himself multiple times, and I was here for it every time. So, but I'm so glad that he had the self-awareness of saying he wants to talk to someone that understands his plight. Because when she told him about himself, when she was like, why did you pick me? It's because you have mommy issues. Yeah. It's so many words.
I mean, she was definitely phenomenal with just the self-awareness to question him and say, am I really the best person suited to help you? Like to possibly take that money out of her pocket and care more about her patient than she cares about her livelihood, because he is someone who is coming to pay her. Yes. Just speaks to her level of care and integrity that she was supposed to have, which, God, I hope I get a therapist like that.
Right. But can we talk about his conversation with, Deja's boyfriend? That was when that's when that light switch flipped up. When he realized that ease of conversation, when he was like, I think you're my best friend now, but you're my daughters, boyfriends, so we can't do this. But
that exchange was so cute.
I loved it.
It was possibly my favorite scene in that whole first 2 hours. I
think it was the lightest because everything else was very drama.
But it was just so cute though. Like it was Randall at his I love dad joke, easy-hearted Randall.
Yeah.
I know that he has, his own personal issues he has to deal with, but one of the reasons why he's my favorite character
and he made people, that's another thing, he made people comfortable.
Yeah.
In that
absolutely.
I don't want to say persona, but in that facing, because everybody's multifaceted. So in that facet,
for sure. And I don't say, and that's why I was kind of going to caveat it to say, I mean, Randall was an imperfect person like everybody, but I think his levity or his ability to, give off some of the greatest parts of his personality, even through hardship, is one of the things that I love about him. And to his point, yes, he has had to be that light, unfortunately, sometimes because his family has gone through quite a bit.
So much.
And that's
why his possessiveness over Rebecca, although unhealthy, it kind of makes sense. And then it showed itself when he was like, what's her medication? None of y'all have done the research I have done, but y'all trying to rip her away from me, and I just helped save her life. Thank you very much. Don't get me wrong, Randall, I had a complicated relationship with him last season. He was off the rails. And
they showed more of his flaws than they had in any previous seasons. This is season 5 of This Is Us, by the way, for anyone who has not been really following along. They're now in season 5 of the series.
The other thing I want to highlight is what his wife had to say, and that line when she said, honey, you were born out of tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
That
tragedy.
Whole section just blew me away, like with the writing, and I think I got misty-eyed in that moment.
Those Beth and Randall conversations are some of the best writing of the entire show.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
And Rebecca and Jack, they have some really important moments, but I think I understand what your feelings are when it comes to Randall and Beth, because their conversation is our conversation, right?
So, I can more relate to the relationship of Randall and Beth than I can. Not that I don't think Jack and Rebecca's story and love story is beautiful. I think it's absolutely beautiful. And Milo Ventimiglia, I have been in love with for a very, very, very long time.
Gilmore Girl?
I got into it later in life. Again, not a show I super relate to, but I found enjoyment in it. And I mean, I could name you a lot of stuff I've enjoyed with Milo. But overall, though, what did you think of that cliffhanger that we're going to be left with of Randall's mother and her potentially still being alive?
Honestly, the first thought that came to mind is that we're centering Randall again on the series, and I love it when they do that, but I hope it's not more of the same, just because sometimes shows can get lazy like that, but I don't think This Is Us would do that, because they know they're going to be ending, I think what they say is season 7 or something. They only have 2 more
I didn't hear they
left.
had a firm. Okay.
Oh yeah, they know they have a timeline, so
okay. Well, I'll just say my thought on it was, holy shit. And
that too.
Don't present this storyline to me if this lady is not still alive. Like, I think it left me with so many thoughts about, like, where has she been? Why are we introducing this? I couldn't take if they had another one of his parents show up and then die, or for some reason not work out. Like, we already went through this, right? He already lost his adopted father, then his biological father. Now his adopted mother has Alzheimer's. Are you telling me his biological mother is going to come back and, like, I just can't.
Honestly, I'm hoping that she's probably had other kids, had other relationships. I just hope that he catches her in a healthier state. Oh, and I just realized this just now. There's a bit of a rhythm to This Is Us, where it's like someone's on the search of somebody and you're questioning whether or not they're alive or not. So we did that with season 1. Randall and his father. We did this with Jack's brother in the Vietnam War.
Oh, man.
And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I think this is the third time this is happening. You know what I mean? Where it's like someone in the past, are they still alive? You know.
Mm-hmm.
So
this episode was also pretty baby heavy, right? Because it's Kevin dealing with the fact that he'll be having twins, and then you have Kate and her husband dealing with the fact they're going to be adopting a baby. So it's almost like, you know, life and death always is ever present in the world and orbit of This Is Us. So as an overall show, though, I'm still very engaged. I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with this season. As hard as certain episodes are to get through, as much as I love Bubblegum TV, This Is Us is one of those that I will stick with for the dramatics and for the sometimes teary-eyed moments of like, damn, y'all got me again. I need a Kleenex.
I have been such a loyal This Is Us watcher that literally the day we came home with my baby, it was like she had only been home for day 2, and I'm like, oh, This Is Us comes on at 9.
Girl, you do some ride or die moments for these TV and film. At some point, you'll have to tell that story of Black Panther, but let's do that another day.
All right, Ashley. And that ends our hot topics and microdose. Now It's time for the recap.
Our recap for this week is Emily in Paris, which is a Netflix series. We are only recapping episodes 1 through 5 today, so stick with us next week for the remaining 6 through 10. Each episode is 30 minutes. The series was dropped on October 2nd, 2020. A quick summary: Chicago marketing executive Emily Cooper lands a dream job and is hired to provide an American perspective at a marketing firm in Paris. The creator and writer of this is Darren Star, who is most famously known for Sex and the City. He also has Younger, which is on TV Land.
Love that show.
Yes, I do too. The main cast stars Lily Collins, who is our main character, Emily Cooper. Lily is also a producer on this project.
Impressive.
Absolutely. You have Lucas Bravo, who plays Gabriel. You have Ashley Park, who plays Mindy Chin. You have Philippine Leroy Abilu, I believe. Apologies if I mispronounce anyone's name. I did not study French in school. I studied Spanish. We also have William Abadi Antoine Lambert, who play, we have William Abadi, who plays Antoine Lambert. Read it all together. We have Kami Razit, who plays Kami. We have Samuel Arnold, who plays Julian. We have Bruno Guri, who plays Luke. We have Kate Walsh, who plays Madeline. And we have Arnaud Viard, who plays Paul Broussard. So looking at the reviews for this show thus far, Delora, Rotten Tomatoes at the time that I checked had a 65% critics score, 62% audience score, and yet Google users, there was a 94% of Google users who liked this show. So fascinating in that from the perspective of a lot of the reviews, things like that, it's sort of a mixed bag. And even people who review-wise did not give it a good score, it seemed like they understood why people loved it, right? One of my favorite reviews was from Rolling Stone. And obviously, there's a lot of comparisons that people have made between this and Sex and the City. One of my favorite lines in that article was, showrunner Darren Star put Carrie Bradshaw through more in the opening credits of Sex and the City than he does with his latest leading lady over the course of this entire series.
Period.
So I think it really speaks to the fact that, one of the criticisms is that this is very frivolous, that there's really no commentary or moving of culture or anything that's earth-shattering about this show, right? Like I always like to call shows like this kind of bubblegum TV. It's the feel good, look good, all of the things. And I think he even called it shallow. I think that's really the general sentiment. Online, they had their staff, one person who said that they loved it, another person who said they didn't. So, I mean, it's just kind of a mixed bag. But I think the overall sentiment of it, again, is kind of, whether you like it or don't like it, we understand why people are choosing to watch it. So the rating the rating that I'm giving this show is a B. And the reason why I give it a B is because while it is not earth-shattering, while it did not move me really in one way or another, I thoroughly enjoyed watching this show because it is right in my wheelhouse of you have some fun, you have some sex, you have some fashion, you have all the things that I enjoy in just a quick binge of a series that is, that served its purpose for me. So what was your rating for this series, Laura?
So, disclaimer, I only watched the first 5 episodes because I knew we were going to review the first 5 episodes.
Okay.
And I wanted to keep my impressions of the show fresh for our audience. And based off what I've seen, I wrote down that it was basic, that it was shallow, and I put / kiddie pool in it. So to hear the Rolling Stone review talk about how, or was it the Rolling Stone? How
it was.
He did more in Sex and the City first episode than he did
in the opening credits.
I see that. I feel that 1000%. So with that being said, I will rate this show a C+.
Okay.
And I give it a C+ because I did study French in high school. So I love France. I love French culture, Paris in particular. I've been. I am obsessed. I look forward to going again. That is the thing that keeps me. Okay. The fact that she is in Paris and that you are surrounded by beautiful architecture and the fashion, the culture. But Emily as a main character, based on the first 5 episodes I've seen, we would not be friends. She gets on my nerves, and I look forward to explaining more after our spoiler alert.
Okay. All right. I will say that Darren Star, some of the criticisms too was in Emily's age, which, we can get into a little bit. Basically, I think that Lily Collins was asked how old her character was, and she said, oh, she's probably like, early 20s, 22. And people are like, that makes no sense. But we can dive into why, as far as where she seemed to be in life, criticism like that may or may not make sense, as well as Darren Star kind of saying to the criticism about there being a lot of cliches, like, listen, I wanted there to be cliches because we're seeing this through the eyes of someone who is not familiar with this culture. She's never been there.
And I have a lot of thoughts on that.
Doesn't speak the language, right? And he's like, that's what I wanted this to be. Season 2, if there is a season 2, he's saying will be more about, I guess a deeper feel for French culture, because then she'll be a resident. But I will say that was some additional thoughts that people had about it in Darren Starr's response. So now that we've given our grades, spoiler alert, turn it off if you have not synced it yet. And I say that personally, synced it. So Delora, I know you wanted to give more about kind of your first impressions. I know you love themes. And then I also, because this is a Darren Star production, we have to talk fashion. So give me all the tea, honey.
Okay, so I love French culture. Grew to love it because I took it in high school. So as you also mentioned, I had the opportunity to go there. So I have a lot of positive, warm memories in Paris. And I felt like I really wrote this down, Ashley. I said, did they really think they could have a show with just Paris architecture, fabulous style, and have it make up for a thin plot? That is a question I wrote. Yeah. Again, only 5 episodes in. I look forward to seeing some of the conclusions. I am a fan of Mr. Starr's work. I love Sex and the City, including first movie. We don't speak of the second one. I love Younger. But
I love you so much.
So, like, again, is Emily dressed fabulously? Absolutely. Is it a gorgeous show? Absolutely. But I was also a business student, and the first thing we learn when we are interacting with people of different cultures is to at least know the basics. I wrote this in my notes as well. Taught in business to know the rooms you're going into, which includes the culture.
Yeah.
So in terms of themes, I'm not there yet, because I think with five episodes in, it's like it is meant to be light. And I don't want to sound so critical of it. I just think I don't have a lot of patience for somebody who got promoted and is this ignorant. I think that's where my annoyance comes in. And again, I know it's a show, and I am there for the rom-com and the fashion. I mean, in a never will be released podcast, we recapped Love Guaranteed, and I was gushing all over that movie because it was just the most sappy, syrupy show out there, or movie out there. And it had the fall fashion and the love and the good looking people. With this show, it's a lot of good looking people, but Emily's working my nerves. Okay. What are your thoughts, Ashley?
Yeah. So first of all, I love that you only watched the first 5 episodes so that you can stay fresh, because I've watched the whole show. And so I kept thinking, like, Ashley, what did you think when you first watched this? Like, I can't even remember. It's been so long in the world of content, guys. I watch a lot of stuff. So I'm trying to think. Again, I thoroughly enjoyed it, again, for what it was for me, right? Like, I am a fan, especially in 2020, of bubblegum television. I need things that are mindless, that are frivolous, that I do not have to think too much about. So in that vein, it definitely accomplished its job. To your point about some of the annoyances, I absolutely felt them. And I think the reason why I mentioned especially the Darren Star commentary too is I think there was an intentionality to some of it that I'm just now understanding now, because I remember thinking before, like, Emily, you're just really privileged and arrogant. And there's a component of that obviously is felt by the other characters, especially the French characters, as she starts to integrate into this world. And that did bother me to a certain extent. But again, because they keep it so light, I didn't dwell on it for long. I think it's interesting. You liked her fashion. I hated most of her outfits, to be honest.
Really?
Which I found, you know how much I found that so disappointing.
I love that yellow dress in the first episode, I think, with the yellow heels.
So the only outfits that I can recall that I really loved was a shorts ensemble where it was like a jacket and shorts that were black and white. I think I really enjoyed that outfit. And then I really liked like a flowery floral dress that she wore. Otherwise, Mindy, who is my girl in the show.
I was going to say Mindy's my favorite character so far.
Mindy and Kami, I love their fashion looks way more than I loved Emily's. And I think there was something that Rolling Stone article about, like, it looked like Claire's threw up on Emily or something like that in terms of like her outfits, and especially that skirt that like
it could have been like she was trying really hard, whereas French people, and I don't want to sound so general, but when I was there, what I absolutely loved when I was in Paris, the food, the fashion, they walked everywhere and they had the most amazing shoes. It was like mind blowing to me. And I obviously stood out as an American because everyone there was skinny, by the way. So when her boss was like,
everybody's fat.
No. When she was like, "Oh, you want to go to lunch?" And she's like, "Oh no, I have a cigarette." I am like, that's probably true based off what.
Okay.
what
I think she's talking about in one of the episodes where she meets the head guy, and he's like, everybody in Chicago was fat. I was like, whoa,
oh yeah, that was funny.
Okay,
but it wouldn't be surprising. I guess I will say that again. There was a lot of generalizations going on in the show, a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Yeah, to your point again, I haven't been to Paris, so I'm only looking through the lens of someone who has seen it, seen pictures, heard you talk about it. I still have a magnet on my refrigerator from you. Thank you so much. So I have a piece of Paris in my house, but you know,
and I got it from there, not the airport. Just FYI,
much appreciated.
That matters. Okay,
much appreciated. We ain't been, but we got a piece. Okay. So are you ready to dive in? You want to dive in?
Absolutely, yes.
All right, so let's move on to episode 1. Again, guys, we're only covering episodes 1 through 5 for this first show. So episode 1, titled Emily in Paris. We open up in Chicago, Delora, because this is where Emily is living, and we see some kind of beautiful shots of the city. We see Emily, she's out for a run, so they show some great skyline, downtown, stuff like that. We move on to her being in the office, walking with her boss, Madeline, who's played by the impeccable Kate Walsh.
Love her. I put a heart next to her name because
I know you're a great big Grace fan. So,
absolutely.
You know, Kate Walsh. So in this first scene, you know, we're seeing that there's a promotion that Emily's boss Madeline received, and she's talking about the fact that she's going to be moving to Paris because their company has acquired another company there. And
she has a degree in French.
Yeah, that was my next line.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Madeline mentioned she has a master's degree in French, so it seems like she's prepared. She's excited for this opportunity. But then all of a sudden we see Madeline smell some perfume that is from one of the clients in France, and she gets sick. So immediately, at least as a woman, I'm like, she's pregnant, right?
Absolutely.
Like, I watched this again with my mom and my aunt, and my aunt was like, oh, she's pregnant. So cut to next scene, we see Emily going to meet her boyfriend, Doug, at a bar, and she makes the announcement that her boss is pregnant. And because of this pregnancy, Emily now has been asked to take the job for a year in Paris to help with the transition. And she's been offered a senior brand manager position when she returns back to Chicago thereafter. So this is the first time we're seeing that someone's pointing out to Emily, like, the potential cons of this, right? Which is Emily's boyfriend saying, but you don't even speak French. Emily, though, seems unfazed by her lack of culture, her lack of knowing the language, and it seems like she is really prepared and hoping to make a long-distance relationship work with her boyfriend, Delora, because she has created a whole spreadsheet for this man.
The good old can-do attitude, right?
Yes.
What Americans are known for.
She was so ready. She was so prepared. And her boyfriend seemed like at the time he was ready to go along for this ride. So, you know, next scene, we're seeing Emily. She's in a taxi going through the streets of Paris. She has an apartment, a rental that was set up for her through her company. There's no elevator.
I want to mention really quick. Absolutely. It wasn't even 5 minutes in the episode before we were in Paris. So they didn't waste any time.
I mean, it's titled Emily in Paris for a reason. They're like, listen, we got to get there. Let's get there. That's what this is all about. Emily, again, as I mentioned, she's going to her new apartment in Paris. There's no elevator, of course, but she happens to live on the 5th floor. There was a funny bit about, again, being an American, yes, there are going to be differences between things, the way they do things in Europe, the way they do things in America. So there's confusion on her flooring. So she lives on the 5th floor, but it's technically the 6th floor, right? Because the first floor there is considered the ground floor. So the reason why this is important is going to be because she's going to get this mixed up a few times, and that's really going to become a thing between her and her neighbor, but I'm getting there. So, you know, as Emily gets taken into her apartment, it's this small room, but of course it has an amazing view, Delora. You open up to the beautifulness of the city of Paris. This was her first cultural reference, her first movie reference, and I loved it because, again, I think that's one of the reasons why I related to this show. She said, I feel just like Nicole Kidman in Moulin Rouge. So anyone who's seen Moulin Rouge.
And I thought it was, you're going to think I'm awful, I thought it was basic.
I mean, your point about it being basic from the view or from her apartment, or which part you feel is basic?
Cultural reference. I think she told her boyfriend over the phone. Oh, it reminds me of Ratatouille. I was a little disappointed. That's all.
Yeah, we get to those. It's like a running theme that she talks about a lot of different movies. Because again, she's this American who has never, and they don't say how much travel experience Emily has had, but you almost think she hasn't had a lot. because
you assume that,
yes,
especially with international travel.
Exactly. So as she's going through this rental, getting settled, her rental agent is already hitting on her, Delora. She notes that or he notes rather that you may have a boyfriend in Chicago, but you don't have one in Paris yet. So it's just giving you a sip of kind of what the attitude is going to potentially be for her.
Making French people real
life.
Sexy. Sexy.
This man did not waste no time. So Emily, the end of the scene is kind of Emily taking a picture of her viewing her apartment. And the reason why I mention this is because Instagram and social media is a very important element of this show. Yes. So at this point, we see she only has 48 followers on Instagram, which is incredibly low. Did she just join Instagram yesterday? I was wondering.
No, I think she decided to. My assumption was that she wanted to start a new account to capture her Paris adventures. Yes.
So again, she started this yesterday. Not that I have a lot of Instagram followers, guys. I'm just noting 48 is nude low.
I delete people who have that low
because you think
followers.
It's a fake account.
I think it's a bot. Account. Absolutely.
Yeah. So next we're heading to Emily going to the office in Paris where she'll be working. The first person she meets is Julian, who's going to be one of her coworkers, and Emily assumes for some reason that this man can't speak English, and she tries to use her phone translator to communicate with him. Next, we meet her new boss, Sylvie. Both realize not only can Emily not speak French, but she is not who they were expecting. Because again, they were expecting Madeline. Yes. Sylvie mentions that Emily not speaking French is a problem, and Emily's response is that she's taking a class.
Yes, so it is true. French people do not like Americans who go over there and, just don't even try. Like, they actually will help you if you at least present yourself and say, bonjour. Make an effort. If you just straight up say, do you speak English? They're kind of like, why the F should I? You're in my country. How we treat everybody else, basically.
Exactly.
And so, they say the French people are mean, sure, but in some respects, they take great pride in their culture, and you have to show effort, like you mentioned. So that's why I was super annoyed, I think, when watching her throughout this, because I'm just like, she told her boyfriend, fake it till you make it. And I just was like, it's arrogant. And I think I get frustrated because I am an American. My ancestors are from here. They're here. They were here for many years. But I get frustrated with our culture, American culture, because we act like we are on some isolated island in the middle of the sea, when we share a continent with Canada and Mexico. And that's the one thing that I do find interesting about any other country, frankly, on the planet, whether you're in Europe or Africa. People they know multiple languages fluently. Yes, and they understand their surroundings and the cultures around them. Now, granted, America, we are privileged because it's a big chunk of land that has a bunch of culture even within our own country. However, the way we operate in international spaces, I think it's very arrogant. And then, you understand why some people kind of like, oh, Americans.
and obviously it's very much felt, and it's very much going to be said and spoken, and just, you're gonna feel it in multiple ways throughout this series. But Absolutely. It was funny the fact that when she did try, Sylvie was like, maybe it's best not to try.
It was so bad.
Her French was so
bad.
So again, it's not even just the fact that she doesn't know the language, but it's like, did you ever, was this ever even in your mind? And again, the one thing that I do give Emily at this point is, as someone who would have also taken this opportunity and not spoken French, yes, I would have done my best, but this was a fantastic job opportunity. Let's not forget. As a person in her position, I would have absolutely taken it too. Would I have handled it differently than how Emily handled it? Yes.
Absolutely. And I think that's the frustration I think I might have had. If I was given that opportunity, I would have picked up all the French books. I would have, and she was like, oh, the Rosetta Stone on the plane.
Right. It hasn't synced in yet. It hasn't synced in yet.
Girl, this ain't funny. This ain't cute. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. It's a real reaction, right? And again,
but yes, that's the one thing I did appreciate. Oh, to your point though, I appreciate her ambition. I appreciate her willing to, try new things. Mm-hmm. I just think she did the bare minimum, which to me doesn't really correlate with her level of ambition.
Yeah, I think there's to a certain extent, and we'll keep going with this in just a second. I think to a certain extent to her idea that I'm supposed to be going here to give an American perspective made her arrogance worse, because had it been, listen, you need to go to France and you need to ingratiate yourself into French culture, which either way she should be attempting to do, because the best way to get to know these people is obviously to understand them, to learn about them. You're in a totally different country.
People are extremely resistant to change,
absolutely,
especially after mergers, because they fear that their jobs are on the line, and it doesn't help.
And they are. They are.
Frankly, they are. And, let's keep it 1,000. Sylvie might have felt intimidated because it's some young, quote unquote, girl coming in telling her what to do. It's like.
And ageism is a running theme in their relationship, which we can talk about, especially as the series goes on, as they're kind of pitted against each other to a certain extent, not just in professional capacity, but in personal capacity. So I think great points that you made. Moving on just a little bit, Emily meets Paul Broussard, who is the founder of the company that her company is taking over, Savoir. And he mentions that Emily's experience, which again, guys, lends to me and Dolores' discussion about, her credentials and her taking on this role. Her experience isn't even in fashion and luxury brands. That's what they're about. It's in promoting pharmaceuticals and geriatric care facilities. So Mr. Broussard basically mentions, I've been to Chicago once. I had the deep dish pizza, which was disgusting. And
she's like, oh yes, we take great pride in it.
Girl, he called people fat. And Emily mentions, oh, you must have gone to Lou Malnati's. Well, Laura, I don't know if you saw, the owner of that restaurant was not happy in real life about that mention. That is a real restaurant.
Oh, wow.
That story blew up. They mentioned it in articles from the Hollywood Reporter to Variety. The owner of that restaurant called it heartless and not humorous in the midst of COVID-19. So do you think that the writer should have gone with a fake restaurant in that case?
So the thing that I do love about Darren Star's shows is they're really up to the moment culturally. Like, they like to talk about things that are happening in real time, and they're really good at highlighting or shouting out real restaurants, real designers, real people. Like, that's a runny thing. So how would they I don't know.
Maybe this is one of those scenes where they should have had her usual can-do, upbeat attitude, give positive reviews versus negative.
Well, she did. She was like, oh, you must have tried here. This is the pride of Chicago.
Well, she says that before. She says that deep dish pizza is the pride. Yes. But then when he says that it was disgusting, she said, oh, you must have had this, as in their pizza is disgusting.
That's right.
She agrees. She agrees with that, which is why the owner was so upset.
Yeah. I don't know. That's interesting. I actually forgot about the flow of that. So thanks for explaining that. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, but to your point, I love the fact that you're saying that it's a staple in the way that Darren Star likes to do his writing and his productions, that he wants to use real examples. Again, I just think maybe that's one of those that was a hit and miss. Especially this time in our country and the tone. You really don't want to try to go after businesses, because especially it's just a struggle. So
it is.
He's probably more sensitive. Get the
stimulus or anything like that.
He's probably a little more sensitive than he possibly would have been otherwise, but
under normal
circumstances.
Yeah.
So I just want to talk about that a little bit. So we can move on to the meeting you were already kind of talking about with the department heads. where Emily's introducing herself. She discusses the fact that she's here to present the American perspective and social media strategies. One person immediately gets up and walks out, Delora, because why? She does not speak English. Again,
ding,
Emily
ding,
has come here not speaking French, and you expect for the staff to be able to understand you. You assume that these French people can speak English, or at least you can use your little phone translator. Anyway, she so happens to be the one in charge of social media. Patricia, of course, is what I wrote down. Of course.
Who is impeccably dressed, by the way.
Oh, I loved everything about most of the fashion of the staff, except for Julian's white belt. I was very upset about that, but that's neither here nor there. So at this point,
it was
Delora,
a choice. It was
absolutely a choice. And do your thing, sir. Just know I'm not in favor of white belts, especially on men. Anyway, so at this point, we realize this staff is not impressed with her. Nope. Although, you know, Sylvie kind of talks to Mr. Broussard about the fact this was terms of the sale, it seems apparent immediately that Sylvie wants to ensure that Emily will not be sticking around for very long in the Paris office.
It almost seems like she takes pleasure in it too. Like, oh, yeah, she won't be here for long.
She seems like she was a little opposed to it, possibly from the jump, but Emily has made it even more so.
Yeah.
So next scene you already referenced, which is more film references. Emily's talking to her boyfriend, talking about on a video call that France looks like Ratatouille. It seems that even though this first day may not have gone in Emily's favor very well, she's remaining positive. She admits it wasn't the best. But, you know, again, keeping her Emily ways, and her boyfriend...
I'd like to inject really. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say let me do this one. Her boyfriend at this point is intending to come to Paris. He has his passport, and he's saying, "I'll be there soon." So go ahead, Laura.
So again, I don't mind a great pop culture reference. I think my frustration with her is that she is just leaning solely on that in this business setting. Again, my experience with going to Paris was going to work.
Okay.
And it was a work experience. Right.
I totally forgot that you went for work.
And I remember my preparation for this. So maybe that's why I'm giving her a hard time. But again, we love pop culture. This is a pop culture podcast. Yes. So obviously I appreciate pop culture references. It's just that I felt like they were basic because it just seemed like she didn't do any other work.
Yeah. Dan, I forgot how closely your experiences matched. I forgot that was a business trip.
I wish I'd stayed there for a year, girl.
I totally forgot. Oh man, Delora in Paris coming at y'all soon. Anyway.
Yes.
And so we're moving on to when Emily gets back to her apartment. That mix-up in flooring I talked about causes her to try and enter the wrong one. We meet Gabriel, the meet cute. How did you feel about Gabriel at first sight and introduction?
He's a French dude, good looking French dude who you know immediately that there's going to be something going on. So that's about it. I mean,
he's hot. Like,
and with this error of her understanding what ground floors are and I was like, obviously this will be happening multiple times.
Obvi, right?
This show.
She seems compelled to think that she should not adapt again to French ways, that this is ass backwards and they should be adapting to American ways. I'm just always surprised by people's audacity. That I guess that's just audacity. That's how my mama raised me, I guess. I don't know. It's like respect culture. I think that is very valid, Delora. I think that's very valid. I think that's human, very human of you. She gives another culture, of course. She gives another pop culture reference when she meets him, saying when he says he's from Normandy. Oh, Saving Private Ryan.
Yes.
D-Day. Yep. Like, okay, we're hitting these things heavy. Okay. Anyway.
And of course he didn't know, which he shouldn't. He didn't have to.
Yeah, he's like, I don't watch the movies. What are you talking about? So the next day, Emily is early for work, Delora. Her office does not open until 10:30 in the morning. She's there 2 hours early. Her boss, Sylvie, doesn't get there till 11:15. I literally put in parentheses, my kind of office, because.
And again, you're European culture, especially French culture, I should say, they're very, very lax on that. I'm like, that's why I need to work over there.
I love it. And my friends now talk about me because of it. I work a little bit later than most, and I get my full life off of my sleep. Okay. But again, it's supposed to show a cultural difference, right? So yes. Emily comes in hot in the office. She's ready to
again, you learn this in business school, FYI.
Emily, take notes. Emily comes in hot this day. She's ready to get started. So she tries to go talk to Patricia, who again runs social media. Patricia literally gets up and runs from Emily. She tries to ask her coworkers, tries to ask Sylvie, Julian, Luke to lunch. They all make excuses. To your point, Sylvie says, I'm just going to smoke a cigarette. Mm-hmm. They all kind of make up stuff. So, our little Emily has to go out to a park and eat alone, Delora. But she meets Mindy Chen, your favorite character,
yes,
my favorite character.
Yes.
At this point, we realize Mindy can speak 3 languages:
Boss.
English, French, and Mandarin. And yet, Emily can, by comparison, only speaks English. So in their exchange, we find out that Mindy's from Shanghai. She's been living in Paris for almost a year. She's a nanny. She throws a little bit of shade, I wrote down, about Emily looking like she's from Indiana.
Oh, Lord. Yes. And I caught that immediately. Yes, it was pretty much like her. Though. It was a very polite but disguised way of saying, oh, you live in farm country somewhere.
and to your words earlier, you look a little basic. She said, you look like the girls in Indianapolis. Nice. It's like, girl, that was some shade, honey. That was some shade. But
it was absolutely shade. But I assume her parents have money, by the way.
Well, they absolutely. You talking about Mindy's parents or
oh yes, yeah, Mindy's parents.
Oh yeah, Mindy's parents absolutely do, right? And we're definitely gonna get to that. But the fact that this shade was thrown did not deter the budding of a friendship, right? Mm-hmm. Mindy's kind of the first person Emily's able to talk to, get some advice from. Mindy mentions, French people are mean to your face. And she just says, if you're ever feeling lonely, which obviously, Emily doesn't know anybody there, give me a call and we'll have dinner. So, it was a nice exchange. And again, I just felt like everything in here is a reference to differences in culture, because you have Mindy, who again speaks 3 languages, speaks about her experiences. Why did she go to middle school in Indianapolis? No idea, but she's from Shanghai. Her mother is from Korea. Like she speaks to all these various things that seem like she has a much richer experience than Emily probably has at this point.
And much richer than, frankly, being a nanny for French kids to teach them Mandarin seems like it's just something that she's doing in the meantime. Like she absolutely does not have to do that. So
right, because she seems posh. Again,
absolutely.
Mindy is her and Kami, who we'll meet in a next couple episodes. They have impeccable style for me, right? Like they look like they fit in. Well, Kami is from France, but the way they dress is the way I imagine, the way that Emily dresses was not for me. But we go back
she was cute. She was just like a Carrie Bradshaw, like just mini-me. Yeah.
Maybe for me, and I can say this about Sex and the City, as much as I love Sex and the City, I did not love the fashion on Sex and the City.
Really?
And I think part of that is because I am not a high fashion person. I like
explains a lot.
Yes, I like very put together, tailored looks. I like when clothes fit. I like when people wear them well, but I don't necessarily need a designer or a label to think that something is cute. Actually, most of the stuff that ends up on a runway, I think is trash. So
it's okay. When it comes to high fashion, essentially it's art for the body. And granted, they only like to create art for really skinny women who we call models. I think it actually takes great talent to design for a full figure woman, and I believe that even before I became one. So
okay.
But I just think it's just fashion. It's art. It's expression. It's history. It's bringing things back. I have appreciation for it. I love it. So
I mean, I definitely have an appreciation. I just don't necessarily always love certain things that are worn, because I think that certain things may be art and look great in that capacity. But does that mean you need to wear that shit? No. Like, some of Emily's outfits truly were trash, and I'm like, I can't get past it.
And
was you doing a little
I
shade
disagree.
when you said it explains so much that I don't like high fashion? Was that a little bit of shade?
No, because there's a lot of people because it's like some people don't like abstract art and other people's do. You know what I mean? Like, no.
And to your point, I don't.
But no, I didn't realize. But for me, I love fashion. I've always studied. I didn't study it, but I have a great appreciation for it. I follow it. I follow designers. I follow stylists. And so for me, I'm in it more often than not. Like, you know what I mean? In terms of, having some type of reference to, whatever's going on. So, because I know a lot of people who don't like high fashion. So that's why I'm saying it explains, because it's like, if you don't like it, you don't follow it, and I follow it. So.
Heavily, I get it. So moving on to Emily gets back from her lunch with Mindy, and outside of her office, she sees the staff having lunch without her, and
that would hurt. That would suck.
That was hurtful. And not only that, Delora, when they get back in, both Sylvie and Julian call her Le Plouc, which means, as Emily has to look up, the hick. Julian tried to downplay it in terms of like, oh, it's just, it's like a term of endearment type of thing. My thought at this point was that they may not like Emily, and I don't know if I liked Emily at this point or want her at the office, but for me, name calling was very unprofessional.
Absolutely.
And I thought it was too far. Like, I'm not a fan of bullying, and I think the worst type of bullying is when it's a group setting. So what were your thoughts at this point about the engagement with her coworkers and about her trying to integrate into this office?
It was expected. Again, they're going through a merger. She's, the home headquarters, liaison, so to speak. So there was bound to be some resistance, or I was trying to do the French version. I'm not even going to try to do that right now. So I did feel sorry for her, seeing how they just did not want to give her the time of day. And I also, it's typical, again, of dance star or just this genre in general. You essentially have to prove yourself. You're not automatically welcomed with open arms just because you're there. You have to prove your worth.
For sure.
Then, you can have a conversation on hanging out,
Yeah. Again, I don't have any problem with them not wanting to have lunch or not wanting to be friends but again, I think they took it a little bit too far for me in the way that they, it kind of started to feel like a bullying situation. So I didn't appreciate that.
Absolutely.
But we do cut to the fact that in the next scene, Luke is going to be the first person in the office to really show Emily some kindness. He comes and sits with Emily outside of a cafe, and he apologizes for the nickname. Again, going back to Instagram, we see, Emily has been kind of taking pictures throughout her experiences. She now has 230 followers on Instagram. And during the midst of this conversation, you kind of get an idea of where Luke and the rest of the French staff are coming from, right? Because he mentions, everybody's afraid of Emily because her ideas are newer, maybe better, maybe they need to work harder and make more money. And again, you get the American perspective.
That's the American way,
right?
You can say it. I go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, he mentions, the phrase of Americans live to work and the French work to live, which I think is very European, right? In Europe, they take siestas and, as Emily says later, I can be gone for 3 hours for lunch and nobody misses me.
I was going to say they take long lunches, long, amazing lunches. That's one thing that I did was the most eye-opening when I had the chance to go to Paris. They are serious about their food, meaning your largest meal of the day is lunch, because after breakfast, nothing is open.
Right, because they shut
open.
down. Yeah,
they shut down until they have lunch, and then they shut down again until like 8:00.
Yes, and the reason why I know this, again, to your point, I have not been to Paris, but I have been to Spain. So yes, that's the reason why I'm familiar with the way that they kind of do everything, and the fact that everything that you put in your mouth, not to be weird or sexual about it, is delicious.
It is so freaking good. Like, yeah. I mean, and I don't want to, everything is political. Anyway, they're very strict on their food guidelines. So their food, it's like really clean. Like, and I say this.
You say this to say they actually care about their people? You know? But
when I travel, I'm always concerned about what I'm eating and, you know, not wanting to mess up my stomach or anything like that. Mm-hmm. I ate bread, I drank wine, and I had cheese and butter to my heart's content, and my stomach was fine. And I was so impressed because they have such strict guidelines on, you know, their wines and their food, that everything was like very clean and delicious. It was like, whoa.
Yeah, who knew? Who knew? They're not trying to kill everybody. I think that first came to my attention when I realized the ingredients in McDonald's is different depending on what country you're in. And I'm like, that is deeply disturbing, right? They say that they put the active ingredients of Play-Doh in McDonald's chicken nuggets here. I'm like, this is a problem. Y'all do not care about us. Y'all do not love us.
And yeah, the McDonald's in Paris, I was just like, what? They had like a bakery with like I mean, obviously it was cultural, but they were baking in the back. Girl. It wasn't nothing popped in the microwave. Like, and so really quick, earlier this episode, she had her first her first chocolate croissant. That experience is very real. I remember the first time I had one with an apple. It was like an apple tart. Mm-hmm. I was like, I need more of these. Where are these? What is this? What I need? What?
Yeah. What? That melt in your mouth.
That good, and I'm not even exaggerating. Although I have had some friends who've gone to Paris and they said the food was disgusting. I'm like, I don't know where y'all went, but right. We went to some really good places when I was there.
And I mean, to each their own. Again, when I've been to Europe and I went to Spain, everything that I ate was amazing to me. So if you get a chance to go visit Europe, let us know your thoughts. But to continue on with kind of their discussion, they also mentioned in the midst of it, success to her is punishment to him. Emily says work makes her happy. And he says, maybe you don't know what it is to be happy.
That was a read as far as I'm concerned.
No, for sure. Because Emily says, well, you know, I consider that to be arrogant. He was like, listen, you came to Paris without knowing any French. So who's really arrogant in this situation? And she says, well, maybe that's more ignorant than arrogant. So this conversation was so illuminating in the fact that, again, you realize from our perspective, at least me and your perspective as viewers, we are thinking Emily is arrogant, and she sees it as like, I just don't know any better. What were you going to say, Delora?
Oh, I will say Emily has been, she gets a good telling off a couple of times in the show, which was greatly appreciated. And I thought was, you know, a relief. And this was one of the first ones.
It was, but again, in a very Luke way, which again, I appreciated Luke, and I appreciated that olive branch that he gives. So
I'm assuming I'm going to like him more in the series, because again, only up to episode 5.
I mean, I just think he's one of those people that keeps it a little lighter, right? Because he's not an antagonist to Emily. You know, he's one of the first people who embraces her. So from that perspective, I just appreciated it, because again, I didn't like that everybody was kind of ganging up on her. So that's just my perspective. Mm-hmm. So the episode ends with Emily and her boyfriend Doug attempting phone sex, different time zones, different, you know, strategies for trying to make this situation work. It is not successful. Mm-hmm. The episode ends with Emily causing a power outage in her whole building, trying to plug in her vibrator. So, you know, very, very fun, very light, very funny. So I'm going to keep attempting to to say these titles. Again, Delora, I did not take French, so if you need to correct me, please feel free. So moving on to episode 2, masculin féminin. Did I say that right?
It sounds good to me.
Okay. So again, we left off with Emily trying to make long distance work with Doug. This episode, the same as we did with episode 1, it starts with Emily going for a run, but this time it's through the beautiful scenery of the Parisian streets. Mm-hmm. She's listening to French, again, seemingly trying to embrace the culture. But yet again, she gets flooring mixed up as soon as she gets back to her apartment, and Gabriel has to answer his door again to let her know she's at the wrong spot. They flirt. He tells her she can bang on his door anytime. Are we still feeling Gabriel? I'm sorry, yeah. Gabrielle. I'm saying his name wrong. Gabrielle.
Yeah, of course. But I will say this: in their culture, they don't exude themselves the way Americans do when we work out. Like, so he was like, "What's
them 5-mile runs that she was taking every day?"
Yes, no,
would not be about that life.
But they walk everywhere, and again, they eat their largest meals at lunch, and all that helps with them maintaining amazing shape as a culture.
And I'm all about that. I always say I don't run unless chased, so I'm all about a good walk. Yes. So yet again, Emily is gonna head to work. She accidentally steps in dog shit as she's trying to do so in those white boots, whatever. She attempts to take a picture of the owner of the dog, and we realize that since this morning, Emily's followers have exploded. She had 230 because she took a picture of a statue, and at this point now, Dolores, she has over 1,000. She has 1,435. Do you feel like at this point, because that's something that was a little bit of a criticism, do you feel like the Emily's posts would draw such a large Instagram following? Because I think people saw it as very basic as far as what she was posting and in terms of her engagement.
It's absolutely basic. No, it wouldn't happen to a regular person. Not at
all. Okay. So
but this isn't it's at the end of this episode, right?
Where she gets way more. Yeah. So when she gets to work after this scene, Julian yet again calls her Le Plouc. She uses her phone to tell him to go fuck yourself in French.
Yeah.
Which Julian seemed to enjoy the sassiness, saying, "I think I like you."
Yeah,
I put in
my
notes. I put in my notes again. Where's the professionalism? Am I being too American?
That's so funny. I don't know. That I cannot speak to. But I, in order to get a bully off your back, you got to push back. And I did appreciate that about her.
Yeah, she did. She took it in stride, but at the same time, it's like, y'all are not gonna steamroll over me rather in this scenario. So she tries again with Sylvie. She goes to her office to discuss ideas for marketing a new product. Sylvie mentions at this point that they have different approaches. Emily has no mystery. Granted, at this point, Emily can't even properly say the product's name and called the marketing campaign weak.
Yes.
But
I love that part. She was like, she was shading the mess out of her though. She was like mystery instead of obvious. She's like, you're trying to open doors. I like to keep them closed.
Yes, because again, what she's saying is that the clientele they work with are luxury. So in the luxury sector, it's all about maintaining a level of mystery, not having everything be so accessible, right? We're not Walmart. We're not Target. That is not our aim. So I think she made a valid point. But again, you wonder how much of what Sylvie's saying is because it's how she genuinely feels versus her just having personal issue with Emily.
Absolutely.
Right? So,
absolutely. Taking pride in being opposite of whatever she is.
Exactly. But Delora, at the end of this exchange, Sylvie still invites her to a party that night for the launch of this new product, Delora, as I wrote. So at the party, At the party, Emily seems to make a series of faux pas immediately. Mm-hmm. First, Sylvie scolds her for eating. She says, why don't you have a cigarette? Yet again. Then when she meets the owner of the account, which is Antoine and his wife, Catherine, she calls his nose symmetrical when Mr. Broussard mentions best nose, which means perfumer, because that's his business. He's a composer of scents. Lastly, she launches into too much work talk when Antoine asks her about her American perspective on his product and perfume. What is she saying? His wife asks after her spiel. We don't talk about work at a party, Sylvie said. Did you feel like this was just, again, Emily not understanding the culture and not embracing the culture? Or did you feel like this is something that even if you did, you may have stumbled a little bit going to this soiree?
I think I would have stumbled just a little bit, especially on the business front, because I do think the American side of me would have made my elevator pitch regardless, right? Mm-hmm. She did lay it on a little thick though. So.
As she mentioned though, like he asked, like, what would you have me do? I don't know if he asked me that I'm not supposed to say how I feel.
Yeah, I do feel like she uses her youth and inexperience to her advantage. I feel like that's a strategy. Absolutely.
Okay. Interesting.
But I don't know. I think she didn't mess up. I wasn't as annoyed with her during this dinner party. I think the most annoyance I had at this point was like, okay, know the room. Just in general, just figure out who's going to be there. And not to say, you walk right up to them and act like you don't know them necessarily, but if this name comes up, it was his party. So why wouldn't you know the product, the owner? You understand what I'm trying to say here?
Yeah, I understand. So again, it seems like Emily's making some faux pas though, but Antoine seems quite intrigued because
she's cute.
And the next scene that, he kind of speaks to her alone. He tells her to try on the product, tells her that it suits her. He said wearing perfume is like wearing beautiful lingerie. Mm-hmm. Emily says a line she said earlier to her boss Madeline, which is that it's like wearing poetry. And yet again, he's encouraging her to find a French boyfriend. He said the best way to learn the language, Delora, is in bed, honey. She mentions that she has a boyfriend. She literally says she's engaged to be engaged, and I wrote in parentheses, is that a thing?
No, it's not.
Being engaged to be engaged? Okay.
And when you are engaged, there needs to be a ring. I said it.
Absolutely.
I said it.
Absolutely. Antoine, you kind of see he's flirting. He's lingering at her neck.
Very much.
He says the perfume smells like expensive sex to him.
Yes. I actually put that down. I'm like, poetry versus expensive sex.
Girl, she said, what's better than a cheap date? He says he looks forward to working with and getting to know her. And then we cut to Sylvie is watching this exchange. We don't yet know why. Nope. So we both, it seems like we're at the point where we realize this man, a client, is actively flirting with Emily and wondering where the scenario is going to go. So the next day at the office, Julian is now calling Emily by her name after her "go fuck yourself." Mr. Broussard commends Emily for a successful party and mentions that Antoine was impressed and wants her to work now on this account. But Sylvie comes by and kind of derails this, Delora. She feels that Emily should work on a female hygiene product, which is suppositories to promote vaginal wetness in older women, vajajon, and claims, so the way Sylvie always kind of positions things, which to her credit is brilliant, she does position them in a way that makes sense from a company perspective. Yet again, she says, well, I think Emily should work on this product because she has experience, it matches her experience. She has experience in pharmaceuticals. Yes. Even though you always feel like Sylvie has a hidden agenda behind why she's obvious, trying.
Though.
Yeah.
Yes. But
it's just like you position it brilliantly.
Well, Sylvie. Emily does the same thing too. She gets in, pushed in a corner. She finds her way out of it seamlessly.
Which gets on my, then you talk about something that got on my nerves a little bit. That got on my nerves a little bit. To the credit of television, that is a very television centric thing, that everything always works out in your favor, right? You always have brilliant ideas. But Mr. Broussard does agree with Sylvia in this case and says, yeah, let's start with the necessities, then we'll move you over to the luxuries. I love in this scene that he called it the weather inside the vagina. I have that written down.
Oh my gosh.
The weather inside the vagina.
That's so funny.
It was hilarious. So Sylvie comes back after Mr. Broussard leaves and says she felt Emily was too friendly with Antoine and that he also seemed friendly with her. She asked if Emily is attracted to him. Sylvie mentions, oh, he has a wife. His wife is very nice. She's a good friend. But then Delora, in the very next breath, Julian comes to Emily and warns and says, listen, Sylvie is Antoine's mistress. Were you surprised or was this obvious in the previous scenarios that we saw? Was this obvious to you or was this like, oh, light bulb?
So it was not obvious for me at the dinner party. However, the way she was acting the next day at the office, even, pushing her off the account. Now, pushing her off the account could have happened because of one of two reasons. One, again, Emily's new to the office. You essentially want her to do the less desirable projects first, right? Because no one else wants them. So give them to the new girl. And then of course, two, she didn't like the interaction that she saw between Emily and Antoine. And she's just like, let me let this ice down a little bit because it was a little too hot for my liking. And so when you find out that she is indeed the mistress, I was like, oh, okay. Oh, your tells are quite obvious at this point in terms of your motive, her motives at the time.
Ma'am, you're fucking a client. Like I had so many thoughts.
That too.
I had so many thoughts, right?
I actually was more caught up on the fact that she was knowingly his mistress, Oh,
absolutely. In terms of the dynamics. So obviously we can move on to the next scene, which is Emily went ahead and asked Mindy to go to dinner, and Mindy really breaks down mistress etiquette for her in terms of how people in France see it. So she tells her the situation is probably known and approved between Antoine, his wife, and Sylvie, and that it's more tolerated than discussed. So, to your point, obviously in America, usually we see it as adultery. We usually see it as a no-no. There could be violence. There could be craziness that ensues because of this. But they allude to the fact that in France, it is more understandable, not only understandable, but, really a societal, not expectation, but it's societally accepted in a different way.
Yes. Honestly, it goes way back. There was a king. Actually, I forget the king, but anyway, there was a king. He fell in love with an older woman and she was the mistress, but she became a wife. It was like a whole thing. And honestly, I almost wonder if they were playing up to that, but she managed to be his number one focus, even after she got older and wasn't able to bear him any kids or something crazy like that. So
do your thing, girl.
There's a lot of stories over there that plays into that notion.
And I feel like I had always kind of heard this about French culture, that, they don't have necessarily a problem with affairs, and, love is a little more fluid than in American culture in terms of the acceptance of some of those things. But again,
but the way French people say pleasure just seems very naughty to me.
I think that's intentional. I think that is quite intentional, right? Like sex, the way they played it in the show, sex seems like it is available at potentially all times, which I cannot say I'm even remotely mad about, but it's just like, oh man, y'all are at a different level of freedom than I necessarily will be in my marriage, right? But at this dinner that Emily goes to with Mindy, we get to still learn more about Mindy, which is that she came to Paris for business school under her father's direction at first. She called him the Zipper King of China.
Yes.
It was his dream for Mindy to take over the family business, but she decided to drop out of school Her dad cut her off financially, so that's why she's a nanny. So again, she is rich, which is to our sentiment earlier. She didn't look like she was just somebody's nanny, but she said she would much rather have her freedom instead of a predictable life. So do you feel like this was given a little bit of a taste of, still a difference between Emily and Mindy? And how did you feel about, because I read a certain article that said, listen, Mindy should have been the main character of this show. Did you feel like as a viewer that Mindy, at this point you're more wanting to hear more about Mindy, or are you still staying with Emily and kind of this story of Emily's adventures?
Girl, yes. I want to know more about Mindy by a lot. And I don't know, shade, no shade, I don't care. I wanted to know more about Mindy at this point. So again, especially because the way they set it up when you first meet her, even in that first interaction, she's just like, oh yeah, that's, I'm from Shanghai, but that's a long story. But my mom's Korean, and that's a long story. It's like, yeah, I want these stories, please. Thank you.
So Mindy spinoff, please, is what it sounds like we're requesting.
Or season 2. I don't know. Again, I'm only episode 1 through 5 so far.
Yes. Okay, so at dinner, Emily, her steak isn't cooked enough for her taste. She wants it well done. And going back to the whole idea of that American arrogance, in the way, in my opinion, that she goes about her complaints makes the scene a little unbearable, right? She's like, well, I'll teach the French something about customer service. It's like, ma'am, as Mindy said, you're going to change a whole culture off of one steak.
Yeah.
But then, guess who the chef is? It's Gabrielle. It's Gabrielle, rather, her sexy neighbor who she keeps accidentally coming to his apartment, and immediately she changes her tune. So next scene, Emily is anticipating her boyfriend's arrival in Paris. She's enjoying different foods. At this point, Delora, her Instagram followers have exploded to over 5,000. But on a call with her boyfriend, Doug, he informs her that although he planned to come, he doesn't feel he'd have enough to do while she's working. He doesn't know how to do long distance. He likes their life in Chicago. He thinks she should come home. Wow, is what I put in quotes.
He's basic. Like, give me a freaking break.
I'm sorry, sir.
Why do I need to hold your hand? You are a grown-ass man.
I'm sorry, sir. You want me to do what? You want me to come home? Remember in Normal People, when you said, why can't people do long distance? It was literally going to be a year.
Max.
And you're telling me that you could not put yourself on a plane? Even once? You didn't even try?
For me, the person
and
that
I'm supposedly
love,
engaged to be engaged with you?
It's insane. I mean, real talk, when I was in Paris for work, David came, and guess what? He walked the streets of Paris by himself and London, because I went to London too, because he's a grown man and he knows how to take care of himself in another. I mean, is it intimidating? Yes, because he doesn't know the language, right? But where's that American resiliency, right? That the exploratory side of our culture. I mean, it was weak as far as I'm concerned, that excuse.
It was very disappointing, especially because, again, it's been set up now by Emily that the seriousness of the relationship seemed that there would have been more effort, right? Like they do break up in the scene. She says she's done waiting for him, but I just wrote, like, it just seemed so abrupt for the seriousness.
I saw it coming from a mile away, though.
Well, to the point of the show, it seems like she has so many dicks coming at her, that it would be hard for me to fathom that we're not gonna sample. So
indulge
that's where my
some
head
of
was.
them.
That's where my head was.
Some of them, because Antoine, anyway.
Oh yeah. So you don't really see Emily shedding any tears, but the weather seems to indicate her mood. It's raining in the next scene.
The things you love about rom-coms, of course.
Exactly. Gotta progress on. Well, this too shall pass, Emily. So back at work the next day, She realizes she's starting to work on the Vagision product she's been given. She realizes that vagina in French is masculine when researching for the product that she was assigned. When she goes and asks Sylvie why, Sylvie says, and I quote, maybe because it's something a woman owns and a man possesses. Honey, this does not sit well with Emily, who then ends up creating a viral Instagram post. The vagina is not male. How did you feel about this, Delora?
Wow, I loved it. I actually didn't know that for vagina, but I wasn't learning vagina in high school in French. But that was one thing that was always difficult for me, the whole like male female situation of that language. But
the assignment of gender,
and so it was
which is why this episode is titled the way that it's titled, is because of this debate.
But again, Darren Star, he loves going for shock value every once in a while, and this is definitely it.
A little bit.
So I loved it, and apparently this tweet goes viral. So I know you want to talk to that.
Yeah, so that's why I was mentioning that the post that she creates goes viral.
So much so that I was trying to get to the point where First Lady of France, Macron,
I have it written in that First Lady of France, Brigitte Macron, retweets her. It's interesting because for those who aren't familiar, her backstory is that she's 24 years older than her husband.
She sure is.
And was his former teacher, right?
Absolutely.
So the scandalous nature potentially of this.
It's very sexy.
Yeah, it's like it makes a lot of sense that they would have that be the case. Before we got to that,
I wouldn't want that for my son. I don't have a son, but it speaks to the culture, right? What we were speaking earlier with the wives and the mistress, and not being afraid to be with someone older than you too.
Absolutely.
And actually, there's wisdom in that. Men, you don't always have to go younger. You can go older sometimes.
I mean, clearly, the president of France has no issues whatsoever with a woman with a little bit of experience. Before we got to that, I was just going to mention that Mr. Broussard is going to now leave the company due to that sale. So they're having like their last meal, and that's when that news really breaks, right? Because they're talking about Emily. Yet again, Sylvie's the one who seems like she's kind of against Emily, but this retweet by Brigitte Macron is sent to him by the client, who is thrilled by this, because just imagine the publicity that this client would have gotten off of something like that. I mean, that would have been absolutely huge.
I always find it interesting because his characters, these women characters always, do things out of the norm that traditionally people would panic, but it always works out, right? Like,
always.
Whereas
television magic.
Yes, whereas it's like someone would have gotten fired from that more, depending on how people would react to it. So
I mean, it was definitely a gamble. It was definitely a gamble on her part. And I was just going to speak to right before that to the fact that, Emily had went and met up with Mindy, and that was the first time we kind of saw her expressing any form of real doubt. Like, I think she kind of yet again put in a move reference saying, "Oh, I feel like Alice through the looking glass," and kind of feeling out of place. So this was kind of a win for Emily, and that not only was it a win with her coworkers, but I think it helped to solidify her feelings and thoughts about why she came there, because she had started to kind of doubt if she should stay and why she should be there. But at this point, the client is through. Emily walks by. She's invited to the conversation. The episode ends basically with a cheers to Emily, as they call her their own Vagision, which we saw earlier translates to young vagina. And again, I thought that was so strange. I wrote, how strange, but okay. Ageism yet again in the struggle with Sylvie, because why is she being referred to as the young vagina, right? Like, just so weird. So moving on to episode 3, titled Sexy or Sexist. This yet again starts with Emily running, but this time she's interrupted by a call from her boss, Madeline, in America. She tells Emily she's going to send the Paris office their Chicago corporate commandments to give them an idea of their best practices. I just kind of wrote down, this will continue to be a note to cultural differences, not only in the fact that Madeline feels comfortable sending over corporate commandments, but also behind her, you see that a man is peeing in a public urinal. You see as she's going on her run continuously that there's women smoking instead of working out, smoking outside of a spinning class. So next scene, Emily's shower breaks. Gabrielle, of course, comes to her rescue, helps her with translating to the apartment landlord, who really mentions that Emily has been nothing but an issue since she's been there. And she unfortunately
he's always there at the most random but necessary times.
He's always there when you need him, guys. TV magic at its finest, as always. She ends up having to use the bidet to wash out her hair.
That was uncomfortable for me.
Plumber. It was, So for anyone who does not know, the bidet is in the toilet. It is what Europeans and some Americans at this point who have toilets with bidets use to clean their privates after they use the bathroom. So imagine having to wash your hair in that on an unfortunate
toilet. Imagine washing your hair in the toilet.
Yes. So
and it's cold. Oh, Lord Jesus.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. There's no hot function on the bidet. The next thing we see Emily in her French class that she has been supposedly taking. One thing that I loved in this episode was that at the end of class, Emily tries to basically bond with her teacher and ask her teacher to go for a drink. And she says, oh yeah, no problem. I charge 50 euros an hour outside of class though. And I just wrote down, that's too funny and true of trying to make random friends when you move somewhere new.
Well, I thought it was hilarious because it's obvious that teacher has gotten this proposition many of times, and she was just like, honey, I'm on the clock, my time is precious. So if you really want to hang, drop the 50.
It's gonna cost you.
It's gonna cost you. Cash app the euros, please. Thank you.
Yeah, being that I have moved from my hometown to somewhere new, I'm just like, listen, I've definitely been one of those people who befriend the people who I engage with, and you just never know. They're like thinking of you as like, oh, that's cute, you want to hang out. Like I have my friends, I have my family. I don't do this, but if
that's so funny. I love it.
Yeah, it rang very true for me with experience.
I don't think I've done that. I think that's part of the reason why when I was pursuing my master's, I wanted to do in class because I thought it would expose me to people who lived in the area. Ding, ding, ding. It did.
Listen, you met two of your besties.
Exactly. So I think that's how I did it, like through like organizations or, education that way. I mean, and I did become close with some of my coworkers that I don't think I will ever put that much effort in befriending a coworker again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I love them, but you just get some lessons learned. Like, do you need to be this close to everyone you work with? No.
Yeah. And again, I think it's only a product of you move somewhere new and you don't know anybody, right? Because in my hometown, I was not necessarily friends, close friends with coworkers. I already have my friend group. I already have my family. When you move somewhere new, you have no social circle. And loneliness is very palpable when you move to a totally new environment, let alone a new country. So I can only imagine.
But let's keep it 1,000. Emily has no problems making new friends here.
Clearly, she's doing just fine. But she gets back to the office that day. Luke greets her with those lovely corporate commitments. He literally says, "You would like to destroy our French soul," before he storms off. We were at this point where we thought Emily was starting to, her coworkers starting to like her, accept her. This is definitely a setback. Nobody's approving.
When you're from headquarters, you really don't make friends, right? Like
it's almost like she's HR. It's almost like this is very much an HR move. And
absolutely.
That was unfortunate for her social life. But we see Sylvie, Julian, and Emily head to a commercial shoot for the perfume Delore, where we already know that she's been getting involved with. That's how she met Antoine, the client, all of that we spoke to earlier, who they end up meeting with. And Emily is just planning to come to this to grab social for content, but she ends up disapproving of the shoot and messaging as the model strips nude in front of her and has to kind of walk past some men. That's where the title falls in, Sexy or Sexist, because Antoine says, oh, it's her dream to be admired and desired by men. And Emily saying, well, but it's the male gaze.
So, Ashley, I have a question for you.
Absolutely.
Is being naked in front of men a fantasy of yours?
It depends on what setting we're talking about, right? Like, I think in this context, absolutely not. I think in this context, to her point, this is not something that I would see and I would think would be appropriate. But again, I am an American. So in this, yes. From this point of view, me and Emily were seeing eye to eye. Like there's yes. no other thing in my mind when I saw this that I was like, oh, this is cool. I was like, this is like why did you come up with this? And why has no one, do you not have any females on staff that either agree or again, is it just a French thing? So,
and this is definitely where Sylvie's relationship with him to me clouded the judgment on this photo shoot, because I know no woman whose desires to be butt booty naked walking in front of men. That is such a man's idea of what women want. Like, what? No, thank you.
And again, I wasn't sure. So we eventually get to the point that Sylvie calls herself, she says, I'm a woman, not a feminist, when she's kind of siding with Antoine. And I was like, again, is that because of her relationship with Antoine, or is that a French thing? So I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I was going to say, it's such a man's thing because it's very simplistic, because men are visual and women,
right?
And obviously I'm generally speaking, but men are visual people, whereas women appreciate touch and words. Like, he would have been better off saying something more romantic than, and having that be what a woman wants in her dream versus walking down naked in some heels. Like, come on, sir. No, thank you.
In the middle of the city, like, it's not even like we're on a closed shoot. We are on the streets of Paris. And he literally says there's no bigger compliment than desire. That is his thoughts.
And can I say kudos to the model, because she did she did the thing. Okay.
She did. She looked great. But it's interesting too that Antoine, to his point again about caring, or at least seemingly caring, what Emily says, shuts down the whole shoot and sips wine to hear what she has to say about why American women won't respond to this. This is our first mention of kind of the Me Too movement, which I guess in Paris was called, or in France was called, Out Your Pig, as Sylvie mentions. But again, Sylvie does not seem to have those issues. And it, to your point, could have to do with the fact that Sylvie is dating Antoine, has been possibly in a relationship with him for a very long time. But when they get back to the office, she basically says that she doesn't take on such a simplistic view of men and women. She said that's very American. So again, as American women, I was just wondering, how do we feel, and would this translate for any American women? Possibly. I mean, I don't think that we are so alike that there wouldn't be someone in America who would not have a problem with this. But I think if you put this out, the general tone and pulse would be problematic.
Ashley, do you know who Jonathan Vaness is from
I do not.
Queer Eye?
I do not.
So he's in the new iteration of Queer Eye, and he does the hair, and he's in this Uber Eats commercial with Simone Sanders. And he's queer. I think he's non-binary. And there are groups that are in a uproar over the fact that he and she are wearing leotards and tumbling in a gymnastic gym because of his gayness, and
is Jonathan with the longer hair?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Then I absolutely know who you're talking about.
Yeah. So if people are freaking out over that, they would absolutely freak out over a butt-ass naked woman walking down the street. No, No.
Right.
Now, if that was French, I would probably say, oh, yeah, that's probably a sexy commercial. Over here, where are they going to show that at? HBO?
Yeah.
Like, no.
So, again, that's why I was wondering, like, you know, again,
Who
I think
did they consult? And why didn't these conversations happen before all the money and time went into this shoot?
I think to that point, again, this was one of the times that I did think that Emily's voice was necessary and important. Yes. Because I do think that, again, whether or not it was going to translate in France, while there would be some American women who would see no problem with this whatsoever, it would be very tone deaf to release something like this and ad like this in America. And when we get back to the office, Emily goes to her desk and there's a dick drawn on the copy of those corporate commandments that Emily decided to give to the office, which really sets her off. She decides she's going to go to lunch with wine and meets up with Mindy yet again, who's like, Emily, listen, you're going through a lot, whatever. I'm going to throw you a dinner party. Back at the office, Antoine comes in and this finished perfume spot is done. Emily says it doesn't even make sense. Julia's comment says it's a perfume commercial. It's not supposed to make sense. I wrote down so true.
Absolutely.
Name me a perfume commercial that makes sense.
The first commercial that came to mind was freaking Julia Roberts with like the glittery handcuffs or something she took off just to go to a party.
Girl, I keep thinking of that Charlize Theron, the Dior. I'm like, none of them ever make sense.
Yep, exactly.
But as a part of this, to our point about
kind of like high fashion, Ashley.
You know, to each their own in that case. This case a little bit different. To our point earlier about, you know, the general feeling of America, Emily does have an idea, which is put the commercial on Twitter with a poll to determine if this spot is indeed sexy or sex. Get a conversation going, let the world decide.
Right, and it's controversial enough to where a lot of people would chime in. It was brilliant, of course, right?
Of course, because all of Emily's ideas are golden. She's a damn golden child around here.
She is.
So Emily's still trying to become friends with people. It invites Sylvie to this dinner party that Minnie's going to throw her. She tells Emily point blank, listen, we may be coworkers, we may work together, but we will never be friends.
Never.
You didn't bother to learn the language. You treat the city like an amusement park, and eventually you will go back home.
I actually put that in my notes. I was like, Sylvie finally told her. I mean, I actually was very, very happy for this read personally, because I think, again, I haven't warmed up to Emily at this point. and I thought these were all facts. I mean, you didn't even concern yourself to learn about the culture or language. And when she said you use the city as an amusement park, I was just like, yo. I was like, take. She's a taker. I don't know. I feel bad. Maybe I should not have watched this show before the election, because I was just already in my feelings, right?
Fired up. But no, I think that everything that you're saying is valid to the perspective that a lot of people possibly had. Again, I think that's why this show, there's another layer of controversy to this show, which is to your point that Emily is very oblivious and arrogant, and to her point, ignorant about this culture that she has decided to go and become a part of. And I also would like to clarify, I am not saying that she should not be true to herself. I am not saying that, you know, she can't bring herself to the workplace, because obviously she did in a meaningful way when it came to this particular commercial. What I am saying is, put some respect on the French people's name. You are in their city. You're in their country.
In their town, their country. The bottom line thing you could do is at least attempt to seem interested. Okay. That is where I'm coming from. And she had no iota to do that. And that's where I was just deeply bothered by that.
And you are fully entitled to your opinions, Laura. Nobody is taking that from you, baby. Nobody.
Thank you, Ashley.
Of course. But yet again, Emily is taking this rejection in stride. She seems undeterred. She said, listen, I'm still going to send you that address anyway. So at the party Emily goes to, she knows no one except Mindy, and no one seems to really care that Emily is there. But she does meet a cute boy. She leaves the party with him, learning French as they converse. But with everything that has happened thus far in the office, certain levels of inappropriateness, she seemingly gets offended and wants to go home when he says that he likes American pussy. Point blank, period.
I was like, I knew he was funky. I put that in my notes. Like, I felt it coming. He wasn't the one.
Point blank, period, though. But is this a moment? Like, I feel like there were a lot of other moments to be offended by. So I just wonder why this is suddenly the moment you're offended. Is it the blatantness of the word pussy? Like, I was just a little, I just wanted a little bit more. Yeah, I was just like, why now? There's been many moments throughout the show so far. I was like, that was questionable. True. That was unprofessional. But pussy, that's where we draw the line. Got it. Okay. Anyway, she yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, okay. She ends up leaving this little scenario. She goes into Gabrielle's restaurant for a drink and chat, tells him she spent her entire life wanting to be liked and is giving up trying. And he says to her, I like you. So yet again, we're getting this interaction with Gabrielle where he's seeming to be a comfort and a bridge for her of someone just like Mindy who she can relate to and kind of depend on. So Emily picks up a cake of a penis and gives it to Luke and Julian at the office for that earlier pick on those commandments. She says the line made famous by Marie Antoinette, let them eat cake.
I appreciate this moment.
And
that she has some ovaries on her.
And that she had a little bit of culture in that at least she knew a famous line that was said by a famous figure in France, right? It's supposed to show a little bit of a effort, but at the same time, again, you're not offended enough, or giving coworkers a penis cake is not offensive enough, but saying pussy is. Anyway, I just keep harping on that in my mind a little bit. Just keep harping on that a little bit, because that's just a slightly, when you talk about sexy or sexist, why is it we say penis so freely, but pussy is a problem? Anyway, free to pussy. Anyway, the episode ends. The episode ends with Emily going to her desk, and on her desk, Delora, is a box from La Perla, and famous
I knew exactly what it was. I was like, okay.
And a note from Antoine that says, basically, it's for you, boo. It's, little flirty little note. I have in parentheses, I have no words at how inappropriate, but she does claim that it's from a friend when Sylvie comes by and asks her. And that's how we close out episode 3.
I'm appreciative that she's not an idiot. One. And I just pretty much I was like, perfume man wants her.
I mean, what? You get some lingerie on your desk, like, bro, you didn't even try to figure out my home address. You sent that right to the office and said, this is cool. This is appropriate.
I was blown away because, again, I feel like with her basicness, I feel like there's a level of generalities towards the French people and their culture too, which was offensive, because I'm just like, this seems very like, French people are sexual and all French people are this, and basic aspects of their culture that I felt like, and I was just like, oh, they're really playing up this
sex.
Yeah. But all I was like, okay, La Perla. I got excited. I was like, ooh, what'd she get?
I mean, it was cute though. Not gonna lie, it was some cute little lingerie. So we move on to episode 4. A kiss is just a kiss. This is the first episode I made note that Emily's not running to start it. She literally has stopped to smell the roses, which I think is supposed to be a symbol of her progression in terms of, not only her development, but also trying to stop and appreciate more of the French culture. But yet again, we see there are some language barriers. She tries to talk to kind of the owner of the rose shop. And this is where we meet Camille, who walks up, so helpful, so sweet. She yet again knows English, so that's very helpful, obviously, for Emily. She says she learned it from TV, gives Emily advice, kind of on sightseeing things to do. and invites her to an art gallery opening that night.
I want to say really quick.
Yeah.
I was obsessed with these flowers, by the way.
Those pink roses.
Gorgeous. I actually put it down. I was like, roses, gorge.
Yeah, they were, and they matched her outfit, right?
Yes,
that was one of the main points.
Chef's kiss for sure.
Yes, and to your kiss, Emily accidentally kisses Camille on the lips when she's leaving.
Yes,
but Camille doesn't seem to mind. So at first, I was wondering, where is this going?
Like is she a lesbian?
Exactly, and are we going to have a romance between the two of them? I wasn't sure yet. And also, as a part of this, Emily takes a picture with those beautiful roses, and she's now at over 10,000 Instagram followers.
Wow.
With these basic posts. Back at her
would never happen.
Girl, you tell me you don't have no nothing that's endorsed you yet, nothing that pops you off and puts you on the map yet, but you're at 10,000 followers.
I don't even search, who's in Paris? let me follow her.
Absolutely not. Again, it seems very television magic. So back at her apartment, she suddenly is getting packages from home. Gabrielle, yet again, is her knight in shining armor, helps her with these heavy packages, takes them to her apartment. She clearly must really love peanut butter. This woman had peanut butter shipped all the way to freaking France. This is the first time we've seen mention of her ex in a while. She's saying, she can live without him after she pulls out a picture, but she can't live without this damn peanut butter.
I mean, in comfort food, you know, it is comforting.
But I don't know anyone who loves peanut butter quite that much, but teach their own.
Only gym rats, really.
Protein. I'm about to say, for why?
Protein.
Got it. But because her peanut butter's messed up, yet again, we see a little, moment with Gabrielle. He fixes her an omelet at his apartment. Again, he's a chef, so I'm sure that omelet was banging.
Bomb.
And they talk about that lingerie gift from Antoine, and we kind of figure out that what Emily's feelings were about it, which was, it's uncomfortable. She tells him why that situation is really messy.
Yeah.
And also thought it was a little weird that Gabrielle doesn't wash his pans. He's a chef.
Oh, I don't.
He's a chef.
You don't watch you don't watch iron skillets.
So is that the only reason why? Because it was iron?
Oh, I don't know, but
it's
cast iron. Thank you. Yeah, you still clean it. It's just not washed with soap and water.
Okay, because when he made the mention about let's let it marinate, I was like, sir, see, this is speaking to the fact that I'm not a cook, because I was like, how does that work? Like,
girl, yes.
Help me understand.
You know, like with the cast iron, you clean it with oil and salt and wipe it off.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I mean, so I knew that I'm not a complete idiot. I did know that cast iron skillets, you're supposed to clean differently, but I don't even think it resonated in that moment. That was why he just made it seem as if like, we don't clean our pans here. I'm like, sir, what are you saying?
I don't know if that's a we thing, but it could be a chef thing for sure.
Okay. Well,
and I'm sure it's not for any old pan either. I'm sure it's a certain type of something.
That's why I don't ever want to go necessarily in the back of my favorite restaurants, because I don't need to know some of these things. I may never eat at certain places.
So you don't eat at potlucks then?
Oh, hell no, I don't eat at potlucks. Oh, sorry, coworkers, but y'all know I don't eat off at just anybody's food. I don't know how y'all do anything at y'all homes. I don't know who lets pets up on their countertops. We sure don't. We sure do not. But back at the office, moving on, Sylvie and Antoine Delore are arguing loudly, right? Julian informs Emily as she comes in that the combo is centered on Sylvie saying Antoine doesn't appreciate her and him threatening to meet with other agencies. Again, is this the love dynamic or is this about business? We don't know.
Right. I'm sure it's love, but you use the business as a pawn.
Yeah. And it's messy. Everything's messy.
Very.
When you're fucking a client. So Emily feels, because she's very Emily, that she needs to go interrupt this exchange and fix the situation, because she says it's going to look bad on her as kind of the new arrival if they lose,
this client.
Business. Yeah, if they
lose
I guess so. Business.
I didn't see that. I didn't pick that up right away, because I'm just like, okay, what makes her think she can do anything about this? You know?
It's, again, is it arrogance or is it calculating? Is it smart? But she does come in, she does help the situation by mentioning. So when she mentioned earlier that there was someone that she could meet, a hotel group owner, Emily somehow forms that in her head immediately and says, oh, this hotel, I'm going to meet this hotel group owner, Randy Zimmer. Yeah. And basically you can create a signature fragrance for his hotels. So again, it's yet another brilliant idea that Emily comes up with on the spot. She gives Sylvie credit for it. Also gives her those beautiful roses that you love, Delora. Mm-hmm. But after the meeting, it does help Antoine. But after the meeting, Sylvie is not happy. She tosses the roses back on her desk. Mm-hmm. She asks yet again about that lingerie, which now Emily's claiming is from Gabrielle,
a friend.
So Emily again is still trying with the relationship with Sylvie, but at this point, she's not making much headway.
And can we talk really quick about this idea? Like, have you been to a hotel where you're like, oh, this is their signature
There's a signature fragrance?
Yeah. It seems so random to me.
I have, but I can't say that I thought it was a bad idea. Like, I thought about it as I do really love, like, I'm very much a sense of smell person. Mm-hmm. So if I were to go to a hotel that had a signature fragrance, in my mind, that would be pretty dope, especially if it's something I love.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I told you this or you saw my social media. I have always been on the search for the perfect pillow.
Oh, okay.
And I just have the hardest time with pillows. And I do not have a particularly large head. And I say that with confidence, okay? But I just could not find a pillow that worked. And what I did was I bought a pillow from a hotel that I thoroughly enjoy. I bought a Weston pillow. They have this brand, this label called Heavenly. So they have a Heavenly pillow. They even have Heavenly mattresses. So you can buy whole bed sheets, pillows under this label, but the product is so amazing. And I bought it like 2 months ago, and I have been very happy ever since. Like, I was so bad with pillows, like I needed 3 pillows to go to sleep. Like, that's what I needed. And with my Heavenly pillow, I am very happy. So I guess I'm just not familiar with that concept, and I appreciate the ingenuity of it. I just thought, this is really random, but okay.
Well, again, to your point, I think when Emily pitched it, it was supposed to be kind of out of the box, which, again, Emily has these gems, whether or not us as audience members think it's a good idea, I think is very valid discussion. This one I thought was interesting, more so than when we get to the bed idea in particular, which we'll talk about on episode 5. Mm-hmm. I was just like, again, I think that would be pretty dope, because when I come into my house, I know how I want my house to smell. I'm very intentional on that. Mm-hmm. So if I walk into a hotel and there's a certain scent and I love that scent, would that make me I would love it. You know what I mean? It would be it would be a luxury or a signature of that place. So yeah, I think that that, to your point, it is interesting to think about some of these ideas she pitches though. But just moving on, so Luke and Julian at this point take Emily to lunch, because again, it seems like Emily is potentially in the middle of the situation with Antoine and Sylvie. And so they're basically saying, like, Emily, listen, you're the one who's creating drama.
I actually labeled this the know your place lunch.
Yeah. Like because Luke says to her, it's one thing to cheat on your wife with your mistress. It's another thing to cheat on your mistress with a young American.
Now, here's the deal. Did they know the lingerie came from him?
They're assuming, like, in this conversation, they're kind of saying, like, regardless of who you're saying this is from, if this does so happen to be from Antoine, like, be careful. Like, that's the whole sentiment.
What Cardi said, be careful. Okay.
Exactly. And they also give her a little more familiarity with how Antoine and Sylvie's relationship started, which is that he pursued her, right?
Yes.
So, to their point, they're just trying to warn Emily at this point, like, this situation is messy. Not that Emily doesn't know that, but that you need to tread lightly. So
I mean, when she inserted herself in that argument, I really didn't feel comfortable with that, considering we all know where the panties are from. You know what I mean? So
and for me, it's not even just that. It's about knowing your role. Because again, Emily, you're not coming in. You're not the head honcho. You're coming in because you were a part of the acquisition. You're coming in to supposed to give this American perspective, but Sylvia is still your boss. So it's almost, it could be considered disrespectful for you to break in the midst of a meeting that she's having.
And that's what my thoughts were, regardless of their personal relationship or not, or
But again, there's been so many inappropriate moments in this show on a professional level so far that, you know what I mean? If your boss has nicknamed you a hick and is talking shit, then I guess it's all fair game. You know what I mean? It seemed like it may all be fair game. We ain't keeping it that professional.
That's very true.
Yeah. So the next scene, Emily and Mindy go to this art gallery event of comedies. Mindy encourages Emily to have that affair with Antoine. She says, you haven't done Paris right until you've had one wildly inappropriate affair. Tells Emily she'll never get Sylvie to like her. So, you know, why keep trying?
I think there is, I do think there is something about our culture. Is it American culture when it comes to women to, you know, wanting to be liked? But I mean, you're there to work. You're not there to make friends. If you happen to make friends, then so be it. But I thought that was some good advice personally.
I mean, again, Emily earlier mentioned that her goal in life was to have people like her. So it's a part of her nature that seems like she is on this mission for better or for worse. For her sake and her sanity, I agree. I'm not a type of person where, you know, if it doesn't seem like it's working out, that I would keep trying. I think you can maintain a good professional relationship, but we don't have to be friends. Sylvia is your boss. You're there to do your job. Let's get this job done.
And it's another thing too, like I was mentioning previously, like, you know, you have to earn your spot. You kind of can't just waltz in and expect to be completely adored. I just think that's an unrealistic expectation.
Right. I would agree. So at the party, Emily does get to meet Randy Zimmer. She kind of sells him a little bit. He needs a little more convincing. So the next day he meets with Antoine and the Savoir staff to kind of talk about things. That leads to Emily kind of having to set up a dinner because he is going to leave the next day. Randy Zimmer needs just slightly more convincing.
I just had a aha moment.
Okay.
Sylvie is definitely giving me Devil Wears Prada.
Absolutely. Shout out to Johnny, who loves this show because it reminded him of the Devil Wears Prada off jump. This is not a show I would have ever thought Johnny, my Black male best friend, would have ever enjoyed, but he did. And I agree with you. She was obviously not as bad as Miranda Priestley, but she had that coldness.
I mean, because in this particular situation with having her book this dinner, this was like the equivalent of something
the Harry Potter books adventure.
That is I'm visualizing that scene right now. She was like, I want my kids on the train or plane or whatever with these unreleased books. It was
an unpublished Harry Potter manuscript from the Devil Wears Prada. An impossible task. Yes. Absolutely. But thankfully for Emily, the stakes did not feel quite as high as they did in the Devil Wears Prada, but I thought that's a beautiful comparison, Delora. Thank you for that, for sure. Because she sends her an impossible task to get a reservation at a restaurant that nobody is able to. But it plays out in her favor, right? Because while she accidentally gets the dates wrong, she's able to maneuver her relationship with Gabrielle.
Very basic, by the way. She failed to realize that in Europe,
they do the dates opposite
than we do, you know?
And she blames it on the restaurant. She says, you did this on purpose.
Nope.
But again, it works out in her favor that Gabrielle saves the day. He has 30 minutes left before his restaurant closes, and he's able to take them for a table, and the food is absolutely amazing.
And, you know, marketing is one hell of a thing, because the way they were able to spin it, we'll eat here in November, but today we get a chance to eat up and rising chef and, you know, try his meat. It was very like, marketing is something else. I can say that for sure.
I definitely wrote down that Emily's spin in this moment was brilliant, right?
Yeah.
Because she's one of those people who was able to not just turn lemons into lemonade, but she makes you feel good about it. She said, I have good news and I have great news, right? Like, it's not like, oh, sorry, which I think is a valuable lesson for most people, really, is, you know, it's not just her optimism, but it's just really figuring out the best ways to maneuver not necessarily ideal situations. So this is one time I really enjoyed her positivity.
I'm definitely a realist.
Mm-hmm. So, you would have broken down like, listen, sorry.
I believe in giving bad news because I'm just like, just rip the Band-Aid and just tell me the truth. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it to me in that moment, I did appreciate it because I'm like, oh, you know, I can learn from something like this. Like, absolutely just try to see this. I mean, I am overall a very positive person, but you know,
silver lining.
Find the silver lining a little bit more often than not. How about that?
For sure. And this is actually because of the fact this works out. This is the first time that we see Sylvie really praising Emily for doing a good job, and even invites her for drinks after dinner. But she encourages her. She's like, you can come with us, but you know, I think you should go back and deal with your boy, Gabrielle, which Emily decides to do. She goes back, she kisses him passionately.
I mean, without asking, she kind of
without any prerequisite, goes and kisses that man. She comes when Emily exits from the restaurant. She sees Sylvie and Antoine making out. They've been having a little bit of a contentious relationship still up to this point, right? Like,
they had a lovers quarrel.
Yeah, and you know, you even see Sylvie flirting with Randy Zimmer, with the client, yet again during this, to kind of try to make Antoine jealous. But you know, Antoine says when they're kind of talking about closing the deal, he was like, "Listen, I would never leave you." You know, so that is definitely a part of this episode. But when she comes out as well, apart from just seeing Sylvie and Antoine, she also runs into Camille. And guess what? Camille is there because she's there to see her boyfriend. And guess who her damn boyfriend is?
Who is it?
Gabrielle.
Dun, dun, dun.
Awkward is what I wrote in caps.
I was like, oh, they're a gorgeous couple. Duh.
Yeah. I mean, truly, right? Like, and I think what's so disheartening for me in this scene too is like, I ship, as we've talked about in previous episodes, relationships hard. So while I was hoping that maybe Gabrielle was going to turn into a valid love interest for Emily, this is at the point where it's like, I'm dead to that in my heart, because Camille seems so nice and sweet that like for you to still try to pursue her man.
Yeah.
I don't want to give anything away. For you to still try to pursue her man at this point in time is messed up in my mind. So at this point, it's like, oh, well, that's dead. You know,
well,
like, sorry.
If you think about it, where we are with Emily's potential lovers, they're all taken. I mean, Antoine is double taken, like, you know?
Yeah, but you got his wife that, you know, she seems cool and open with, you know, the extramarital situations.
But who wants to be bothered with their boss's lover? But what I'm saying is I'm telling you, his interaction with Emily it's pretty sexy. So,
I mean, it's legit. It's real.
Yeah. So I just feel like, who is somebody else gonna show up? Because at this point, everybody taken. Everybody.
Yes, they are. That's all I got for you. Yes, they are. Again, I don't want to give away too much for you or for the listeners.
That's just how I'm ending episode 4.
Yes. So let's move on to our last episode in this recap, which is episode 5, which is titled Faux Amis, aka in English, false friends, because at this point we see now that there is a love triangle.
No new friends. No new.
Get it, Drake. Get it. So this episode starts out immediately with Emily and Mindy, and Emily is telling Mindy about the fact that Gabrielle has this girlfriend who turns out to be Camille. Frenchmen are flirts is basically what Mindy boiled it down to. I put in my notes, I thought he was single and into Emily as well, because she kind of alludes to the fact that maybe this was all in my head. Maybe he was not, maybe it was all me. Maybe it was, but to our point, we just said it, right? Like, he definitely seemed like he was just as into Emily as she was.
He kissed her back.
He kissed her back.
He did not stop her and say, "Oh no, I have a girlfriend." This
man earlier let this woman use his shower.
Yes. He
told her earlier, bang on my door anytime. Like, these are not that subtle for me. Right? Like, there's some obviousness.
We're not delusional, and we're not overthinking it either.
We're not. This is some sexual stuff that's primal. We know what we do. So at this point, Emily's French still hasn't really improved. She accidentally orders a croissant with a side of condoms, which is a very funny moment in this opening scene. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and guess who pops up as well? Camille. Yes. Yet again, Mindy.
Guess what? She lives in the neighborhood.
She's going to see her man, who is very hard to wake up in the mornings. Okay, like I'm like, y'all are laying this on thick. So Mindy takes a picture of Camille and Emily for her IG, and now she has doubled her. She is at 20,000 Instagram followers. It's insane. So next scene, Emily scores an invite to exclusive social media influencer lunch by a cosmetics company that DM'd her. So again, that's why this element of social media is so important, because Emily has now become considered an influencer because of her number of followers. So Emily goes to work and tells Julian about the invite, who questions that influencer title. She's like, I know, right? But he also mentions that the company, Duray Cosmetics, used to be a client, but they don't speak of it, right? So you're at a quandary, and you realize Emily is at a quandary of, should I do this and see what can happen? Or
right. Can I get them back? Because again, the motive here is, if I am able to get them back, she'll be praised for it. It'll be good for the company. And that's what she claims she's all about, is whatever is best for the client and for the company. She does truly seem passionate about her job, which I do appreciate from my American perspective. So she, in the midst of this, also tries to go and get info from Sylvie, who ends up pushing her onto a new client, Hastings Luxury Beds. Luke's idea, by the way, of the slogan for this involves the Eiffel Tower sex position. I put in my notes, Laura, that he reminds me of Nelson from Boomerang, the movie, the film. The fact that Nelson always wanted to make the freakiest, nastiest commercials. And that Eddie Murphy's character always had to kind of talk him down from those ideas. Full circle moment. Honestly, the first time I learned about this position was from a Shonda Rhimes show, aka Scandal. Ooh. So I just thought that was so funny, because when he said that, I was like, what? Scandal. Olivia was trying to help some socialite who had a release sex tape or something. But anyway, people are very creative. That's all I got to say about that. Listen, and again, going back to the point about what is and is not appropriate in the workplace, the fact that Luke thinks this idea is worthy of a pitch to a client. And he brings it up multiple times. It's not even a one-off. He had to get it shut down in the actual client meeting. But so Emily at this point does decide to go ahead to that influencer event for Duray Cosmetics. And at the event, there were some funny moments. Like, for instance, because she only has 20,000, she gets a little gift bag versus one of the big ones. And a dog, literally a dog, walked in with an owner and had 100,000 followers. So got one of the bigger gift bags. It was just funny little commentary. And everyone was so disinterested. Like, there was for someone to be such influencers on a social media platform, they weren't very social at all. Yeah, and I think that's supposed to speak also generationally, right? That, because of social media and all that, the disengagement in actual reality is supposed to be of note. But I also think it's worth note that in this episode, yet again, things seem to work out brilliantly for Emily, and that after just one post, she's able to meet and get the attention of the CMO of the company, who she wanted to talk to, in the first place.
who calls her clever because she took a strawberry off a freaking wall and talked about smudging lipstick. You know what I mean? So again,
it did make me
worked out very well.
Though, how many people in marketing are influencers? It made me think about that because she just keeps playing down her account like, oh no, I'm not an influencer. I'm just, I do work for this firm, but I'm curious. I wonder how many people in marketing are truly, into social
influencers.
Media. Yeah.
Well, I think they kind of bring that up too, and kind of the dynamic between Emily and the CMO, who ends up being Olivia, in that, Emily's motives are really to bring her back to the agency. But, Olivia kind of makes a point that, agencies are overpriced, antiquated. She says influencers are the future of marketing, and that she ends up wanting Emily to become a brand ambassador for the company. So, I think to your point, I think that's an interesting dynamic that they put forth in the show, in that career path and in that field, that seems like that's probably a discussion, and that is something that is, considered and thought about, especially when it comes to probably profit over, everything else. So if I want to make a profit, is it in my best interest as a company to go with these influencers who may have so much more reach on IG than I could possibly get in one ad that I'm going to spend hundreds of thousands of potential dollars on? You know what I mean? So,
honestly, when I was thinking about that, the business side, when she said that, because I was like, think about this one lunch and you give people a gag bag, and who knows, it's probably a bunch of cheap stuff with your label stuff on it, maybe with a sample or full size, but the reach is immediate, and I'm sure the turnaround is a lot quicker in terms
and
of,
it costs them nothing. Like for that one party, they didn't spend a dime
compared to commercials, compared to print campaigns like that exist anymore. But and I'm not throwing shade because I love paper still too. I still get magazines to the house. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's just an interesting caveat in the nature of kind of business and where certain things are headed, for sure. To move along a little bit, just for the sake of time, we do end up where Camille, Gabrielle, and Emily kind of go out on a night on the town. We do get the sense at the end of the night that, the chemistry that we thought was there between Emily and Gabrielle was really there. And that was not just a figment of Emily's imagination. And Emily gets another win at work, because with the Hastings account, the Hastings luxury beds, the initial pitch that was presented by Sylvie is not really loved by the client, but Emily puts one out about, shooting in Hastings beds and Instagrammable spots around the city, and inviting people to come sleep with us. So yet again, she has this golden idea that a client loves, and that basically saves not only the account, but also Emily's Instagram, because Sylvie gets upset that Emily basically gave DeRay Cosmetics promotion for free, and initially tells Emily, shut this account down. How dare you give free publicity to this person, but we have paying accounts. But
I didn't appreciate that though at all.
Because again, you wonder, is it business or is it personal? And it always seems like with Sylvia, it comes back to a personal issue that she can disguise.
And we never find out up until this point what was the reason for the, deterioration of that relationship. And I also felt like, you can tell me like, hey, I don't want you to promote competitors or former clients on your social media, but I really didn't feel like Sylvie had the right to tell Emily to shut down her profile. I'm like,
Mindy calls it censorship, right? Mindy, who she ends up meeting with, says it's censorship. So, to your point, it wasn't overreach. Did she have good valid points? Yes. But, that's a dynamic again in the workplace, especially in the age of social media, as to how much influence an employer can have over an employee. And especially because this is not something Emily did for work purposes. She just, in this capacity, happened to use it for a former client because she decided to go to this party. So, why should she have to use her personal Instagram account for work purposes? But not to say what Sylvie said did not make sense, especially from this perspective. It's not a good look. And as a professional, you do have to keep those things in mind. So, but again, it ends up working out in Emily's favor, because she goes out on one last hurrah with Mindy in the city. Hastings ends up loving one spot they go to, so she gets to keep her Instagram account. Hooray. And you know, really gets to be an influencer, continue to be influencer with her Emily in Paris account. The episode ends, Delora, with Camille getting invited by Emily to come join her in this shoot, and then Gabrielle seeing it on Instagram and liking the post, and the caption or the hashtag was "Get in bed with us." I have in my notes, teasing with love triangle or a threesome. You be the judge.
I don't think it's that, although I think he likes it very much. Very much. Yeah, it's getting really messy at this point because, again, the only viable love connection she has was Gabrielle at one point, but I don't know how that's gonna untangle. And, you know, again, I only watched it up until this point, so I am looking forward to seeing how the rest of the season's gonna pan out. I do feel like I was able to tolerate Emily a little bit more as the season went on. Like, she became a little bit more palpable for me, or palatable. So I don't know. It's interesting, and I do love Camille. She seems so sweet.
Yeah, she is very sweet. So this was episode.
I really quick. I just want to say I absolutely love that art installation they went to Starry Night.
The Van Gogh.
I want to go. I would have loved that. That's amazing. It amazing.
Definitely looked dope. That was episodes 1 through 5. Is just what I was going to mention, and you know, we'll do 6 through 10 next week. I hope you guys have enjoyed the series and give us any feedback you have on your experience thus far with it. To your point, Delora, I definitely feel like, you know, Emily's journey, as I said from the very beginning, I enjoyed it. Where there are points where I wondered or I questioned the scenarios. I never got super, super deep, but, you know, I enjoyed it. So I hope our listeners are enjoying it so far as well.
Yes, yes.
Do you want to move on to your hidden gems for this week?
Yes, so it's time for hidden gems. So this week, my hidden gems are up first, Blood of Zeus. It is an anime cartoon series on Netflix. It just came out last week. It follows Greek mythology, which I am obsessed with. You know, Zeus and all the other Greek gods. And of course, there's a demigod that you follow. And it's pretty well done. I consumed it fairly quickly. The episodes are anywhere from 25 to 30 minutes. And I believe there's about 10 episodes this season. So you should check it out. And my second hidden gem is Hayley Williams, the front woman of Paramore, which we spoke on a couple of episodes ago. I like to make a correction. Riot is their second album, but it was their first mainstream album. Like, that's when they hit it big. Again, obsessed with that album, my favorite album of all their albums. But she is now solo with her debut album called Petals for Armor. Very poetic. I want to highlight 2 of my favorite songs. The first is called Roses, Lotus, Violet, Iris. Very moody, very slow, absolutely beautiful. My daughter loves it. She's a toddler. I also love My Friends, or is My Friend. And there's a break in the middle of that song that's amazing. Here for it. And those are my 2 hidden gems of this week. What are yours, Ashley?
All right, mine, because I restarted my HBO subscription on on Amazon, are both ones I watched the HBO. The first being The Vow, which is an HBO documentary on the Nexium cult, which I don't know how much familiarity you have with this before, but I remember just hearing about this because of Allison Mack, who was an actress on Smallville. I remember hearing about it here and there, right? In fact, she was a part of some sex cult, but this really dives deep. 9 episodes of a first season about kind of how the cult got started, some key figures that were within it. He has now, the head guy, Keith Raniere, has been charged or has been sentenced to 120 years in prison.
It just happened, so it's very relevant.
Very, very, very current in time. And the pros for it for me really were, one of the things I try to take from all these types of shows is I just really feel like, as crazy as some of these stories can be, I want to know and I want to be aware of the patterns of behavior that people have, especially in kind of, sexual abuse situations, because that is what this really comes down to, is the fact that he was, not only sexually abusing children, but also just generally women, branding them, all sorts of craziness. He started messing with certain women when they were still, young teens, splitting up families, all sorts of stuff. So it got really deep. One thing I did not love about it was that we saw a lot of his footage. And I think as the type of person it seems like he was, I don't want his words to continue to permeate society. So that was one thing that bothered me a little bit, but for the point and perspective of the storytellers, I understand why they felt it was important, because they wanted us to see through the eyes of how you could get involved in this cult, right? Because that was one of the biggest things, was like, when people hear about it, how could you possibly have gone down this path? It is like, listen, there were so many steps before we got to the brand, before we got to the slave master dynamic that happened, that I think they really the grooming. They wanted people to understand this is men and women who got sucked into this cult, right? And again, it's 9 episodes on HBO. There's also a documentary on Stars called Seduced, with one particular woman, Indian Oxenberg, who was a part of this, her mother's journey was a part of the Vow HBO documentary. So I think it's worth a watch. My second is Spies in Disguise, again for levity. I've been watching a lot of animated films. This is a 2009 animated film starring Will Smith and Tom Holland.
You enjoyed it.
Yes, Will Smith was a secret agent who got turned into a pigeon. It was very funny, very cute, very light. I think the messaging was lovely, with kind of very a non-violent angle to it. So, again, I enjoyed it. It was very much, to my point, of bubblegum television. I love an animated film. So, if you want a little levity, check out Spies in Disguise. And those are my 2 hidden gems for this week.
Yay! Thank you all so much for listening to us again this week. If you could follow us on Instagram or Twitter, we're at Recapping Podcast. Feel free to rate, to subscribe, to tell a friend. We would greatly appreciate it.
All the things, guys, all the things. Thank you so much, as always, Delora. It's been a pleasure, girl.
As always, Ashley, thank you.
Let's hope this week goes out on a great note.
From your lips to God's ears.
Amen. All right, guys. See you next time.
Bye.